Namaskar and good morning to all the participants who have joined for INSA-SERB Science Writing Workshop. I, Dr. Arvind Ranade, on behalf of Indian National Science Academy, in the capacity of an Executive Director, I welcome you all for one of the very important initiative that INSA has started in collaboration with the SERB. At the outset, let me introduce the whole panel along with us, and the entire proceeding will be handled by my colleague, Dr. C.M. Nautiyal. To start with, we have Honorable President of our INSA, Professor Chandrima Saha. We have a speaker who will be speaking about expanding the scope of science communication, popularization, and its expansion. The first speaker, Dr. Nakul Parashar, Director, Vigyan Prasar. Then after, we will have the second speaker, Ms. Subhra Priyadarshani, Chief Editor, Nature India. And we have a distinguished panel here. We have Professor Dr. S. Natesh. We have Shri Hassan Javed Khan, who is the Chief Scientist at National Institute of Science, Communication and Policy Research. Very soon, we will be joined by Shri Pallav Bagla, a well-known science journalist. And we have very eminent of my colleague from this academy, Dr. Bratoti Chattopadhyay. We have Dr. Seema Mandal, and we also have our Deputy Executive Director, Finance and Administration, Sri Sunil Zokarkar. On behalf of the entire initiative of SERB and INSA, I welcome you all from the different part of the country who has shown a very keen interest in the science writing, especially by the eminent personalities of our country who has contributed immensely through their pen, with their minds, and with the wonderful platform of various peer-reviewed journals, popular science magazines, and many other platforms of electronic as well as print media. I, on behalf of the entire organizing team, since we have our Honorable President, Professor Chandrima Saha, I will request her to please welcome the President and have your opening remark. Over to Professor Chandrima Saha.
A very good morning to all of you. Can you hear me, Dr. Ranade?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely clear and loud.
Okay. Dear experts, fellows, and other guests, and dear participants, above all, I welcome all of you on behalf of INSA and SERB. Today, it's a distinguished gathering where we have experts who are leaders in their respective fields. They represent a spectrum in expertise, but all in some way related to science writing. It is a real pleasure to welcome you all who have agreed to spare their valuable time for this enthusiastic and energetic prospective writers. The participants come from a variety of excellent institutions of science, technology, and also medical and engineering. While it is clear that only a few of them go into professional writing, but communication is an art that becomes handy wherever you are and whatever you are pursuing. excuse me, we also realized this very recently during the COVID pandemic, when communication to public became very important. And it was possible only because some of the scientists were very articulate and they could come across the TV or write in the newspapers or journals. So this is a very essential skill that one needs to acquire. The experts today include Dr. Antej, who is also a writer, Dr. Nakul Parashar, who not only is director of Vigyan Prasar, but has an enviable track record in publishing industry, startup establishment, and now also in promoting science filmmaking. We have Ms. Shubhra Priyadarshini, who is the chief editor of Nature India, and she has been writing for a sizable amount of time and has shouldered the responsibility of editing a very reputed journal. I need not tell about Nature or even her exciting podcasts that I'm sure some of you may have heard. We have Hassan Javed Khan, who edits the most popular Indian science magazine, The Science Reporter, and is a reputed science writer and broadcaster. I'm sure young people who are interested in science do read Science Reporter often. And then we have journalist Mr. Pallav Bagla, in whom so many skills are packed. He's a photographer, he creates videos, he writes. So I think everyone in this audience must have seen, heard, or read him. The reason we created this unique panel is that the most of the learners are young engineers, doctors, and scientists. They also include managers from organizations like Indian Oil. We intended to limit the audience to 25 to 50 initially, but looking at the response, which was overwhelming, we chose to relax it. Most of the attendees have written their thesis, whether doctoral, MD, or MTech, and some have written research papers too. So this workshop will go beyond the basics and offer them the opportunity to learn tips from masters of the art. Such an opportunity is rare, and I'm sure the attendees will make the best of it. And I'm sure they will not stop here, but go further. I welcome you, young and not so young participants. Everyone here may have a different expectations, but the time is limited. So I urge you to not only listen, but also ask questions. And after all, it's out of your wish to learn this, that you have joined. This is very admirable. So I welcome to this hub of learning. And before I sign off, I would like to thank the entire INSA staff and Dr. C.M. Nautiyal for taking their time out and making this a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chandrima Saha ma'am. I must tell all the audience, in spite of her ill health, she managed herself to be with us and giving us an opening remark. With all your blessings, ma'am, we will proceed now. For the entire proceeding, I will request Dr. C.M. Nautiyal sir to please take over the entire workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for a very good start. And thanks, Dr. Ranade, for this starting this program. Today's program is very exciting. And as you would have seen that the number of participants is really very large. We are almost close to 200. That's the number of participants that have registered. And I think this is a very healthy sign, a very encouraging situation to us. We have a distinguished panel here, and we have two very, very eminent speakers for the session. And the first speaker for this session is Dr. Nakul Parashar, who is director of Vigyan Prasar, a very eminent organization of the country, which has taken lead in science communication in the country through many platforms, be it print medium, be it electronics medium, be it digital medium, or even the direct communication. A person like Dr. Nakul Parashar needs to be properly introduced, even though he's known to most of the people who are attending this workshop. I request Dr. Seema Mandal of INSA to please introduce Dr. Nakul Parashar for me.
Good morning. Dr. Nukul Parashar is currently the Director of Vigyan Prashar, an autonomous organization of DST, Government of India. With a PhD in Material Science and Masters in Physics and Computer Science, Dr. Parashar is a science communicator, university-level researcher, and teacher, ECM specialist, entrepreneur, publisher, and prolific popular science writer. Dr. Parashar has won a number of national and international awards for his writing and work in science and technology communication, popularization, and its extension. Having worked in various international geographies and managed multi-billion-dollar portfolios, Dr. Parashar has set up 4 successful startups in science and technology research, publishing, legal process outsourcing, and finance and risk management. Besides science and technology communication, Dr. Parashar's forte lies in science and technology research, journal publishing, and management, an experience that he gained while having worked with publishers like Elsewhere, Fulber, Springer, Taylor and Francis, ACS, RSC, and OU. In his current role, he has accomplished the operation of India's first science and technology OTT channel, Science and Technology Popular Science monthly magazines in more than 14 Indian languages, and the nation's first science and technology news syndicate, India Science Web. Now I request Dr. Parashar to start the lecture.
Namaskar. Good morning to one and all. It's a pleasure to be here amongst such an august gathering, and I truly thank INSA for that matter. Professor Chandrama Shah, thank you so much for having me and on this platform. It will be a pleasure to speak, share about what we call and what we have acronymized as science communication and popularization and its extension. And we have acronymized it as SCOPE, S-C-O-P-E. And thus that's the topic of today's deliberation. When I was speaking with Professor Nautiyal, I said it will be nicer if we talk about expanding the scope of SCOPE. That will try to cover all that we were looking for in this particular conference. Science communication, popularization, and an extension is something that has been an integral part of science ever since it got started. What happens in labs, what happens in different places of eminence, particularly in science and technology research, needs to percolate down to the masses. It's important that a person on a street understands science and does not fret science and technology. And this is perhaps a reason why most, in the absence of science communication, a concept that science and technology is a very dry and drab subject has emerged. There are many factors that have led to this. Over a period of time, we have seen a great decline in a number of people who would take up science communication as their career, as their passion, and move forward. Secondly, there has been a great decline on the platforms where they could write, they could express, they could come up and tell the world what is being happening. But thanks to internet, thanks to social media, where we now don't have to wait for anybody or any newspaper or any TV channel to take up our stories and go forward. Hence, as a result, it has now opened up channels. It has opened up an entire world where anybody who understands science and wants to tell people about science in an interesting manner can certainly do that. Print, electronic, and other medium that we're talking about have now also started realizing this importance. And in the latest science and technology innovation policy, we find a great reference, relevance, and emphasis on scope or science communication popularization. Having said this, it's important that we all out here have a responsibility towards the society to tell what is happening, what we know about science, and help society come out with a much better rational thinking, much better logical thinking, now with an aim to live a life we start thinking scientifically, we start acting scientifically. And in order to do so, it becomes important that we understand the nuances of communication. We understand the nuances of mass communication, and we understand what exactly our reader, audience, and our consumer wants. And this is why the May 2022 document on scientific social responsibility talks about, emphasizes upon how it is important to take all that pieces of information and make the public aware. Last 2 years, we've all seen how pandemic, how Corona had gripped all of us. And that was a time when every person on the street, every second person was looking towards the scientific community with a great expectation. It was exactly like, farmers in India looking towards the clouds, the monsoon to rain. And in this case, the interface between the society and the scientist were none other than the science communicators. I guess science communicators, despite all odds, did a great job during this pandemic. I see a number of R&D, S&T institutions came forward with whatever content that they could in a format that a general layman could understand and could be benefited from. Our media played an important role. They kept a track on how developments were happening, how our people who were on the ground, who were working in the labs, could come up, speak up, and tell what exactly and how it is happening. This interface between the society and the scientists did a great job by bringing out numerous publications, in numerous ways that they could do so. They even made things much lighter by creating science tunes or science cartoons. And notable for that, every time we all know that, and we are very proud of, that one amongst us, Dr. P.K. Srivastava, Pradeep Srivastava, did a great job. And then he inspired many others to come up with such cartoons or graphic novels on how Corona vaccination is being developed. But in order to do so, how does one pick up threads? How does one write was very important. It's important that when we write for public, we try to understand what their liking is, what the consumer wants. And in this whole mix of things, the first important thing is the language. So if I were to speak to somebody out there in a countryside, would I be speaking in English and telling him? No, I would be speaking in his language. That would be either Hindi or whichever Indian language could it be. So we realized this importance at Vigyan Prasad, and we ensured that we walk up to all those different states in the country, all those organizations that have been relentlessly working over the years in Indian languages to create content that was relevant for it. And for that matter, I think we should all be very happy, particularly science communicators, budding science communicators, that we have such a big area, we have got such a diverse platform and a canvas to work upon. Unlike other places where there's only one single language and then we keep on working in it, we keep on experimenting. Over here, we have such a diverse demography that we enjoy such a diverse packet of different languages. And not only languages, we have these languages, and these languages are associated with different cultural ethos that they have. So it becomes much more interesting and much more rich for any communicator to experiment, write his script for science communication for the masses of that area. Idioms, phrases, languages, thoughts, ideas, culture, what we wear, what we eat is all there, and it's a part of it. But when we do so, it becomes very important to understand that when we write for the target audience or target consumer that we're talking about, we should be focused on what medium are we have taken up. So if we say, if you're writing for television, it has to be different from what we do for something that is meant for print, whether it is a periodical or a non-periodical. Similarly, when we write for electronic medium, we have to be very clear about what is the time period, what is the shelf life, and what platform are we talking about. There are, like in publishing, we have more than 24 publication item types when we talk about science and technology publishing. It's not just research publishing, but it is also about popular science writing as well. Similarly, when we talk about electronic media, we have to be very cautious. We have to be very clear about which segment are we catering to. Are we catering to a section which talks about news? Or are we talking about something which talks about, speaking with a subject matter expert, trying to get his views for a subject which has a time relevance for a period, or something which is agnostic to a time period. If you're talking about, say, for example, anything that has just happened in astronomy. So what we need to do is we do get started with telling what exactly it is, trying to correlate with the best possible thought idea that a person can understand, and take it down to what various other FAQs are related to it. What are the frequently asked questions? So when we have this listed down, our script becomes very meaningful. Our script gets duly concatenated. So the flow is crystal clear, and our delivery reaches and hits the audience in a much stronger and an impeccable manner. So having said this, similarly, when we write for radio, we have to be very cautious about, because in radio, when we speak, we do not have videos where a lot of it is said through a body language. So we have to be very clear that when we're writing for radio, we should understand that somebody who's listening would be a person driving a car on a road, or a farmer working in a field, or a lady at home having put earphones and listening to what you've written. So having said this, this is about the communication standpoint. This is about how and where to, which consumer are you writing to, which audience you're writing to, which readership are you writing to. But the content is important, and we all know content has been a king and will always remain the king. So it always becomes important as custodians of creating a king. We should ensure that we maintain the correctness and completeness of content very much. Having served anything incomplete, right, has always been has not been accepted always, because either you'll have an abrupt end, or you'll fall short of a lot of things that need to convince what you've said. So please ensure when we try to do that, your text is duly complete. And when the text is duly complete, and when you're writing for science and technology, correctness is the basis of it. And when you say correctness, and I'm sure we all go around scouting for content. We go around aggregating content from various sources. They can be continuous sources, they could be disparate sources. There could be different sources altogether. So that is where one needs to use his wisdom, his understanding, his prior knowledge of science and technology. Because while you try to communicate, making it flowery, easy to understand, please make sure that you do not dilute the basic sense, logic of science and technology. It is at that point in time when you're writing, you hold the responsibility. You hold a responsibility and accountability towards your readers, to the society to whom you're catering to. So please ensure that you have a very responsible role when you sit down to write. It's just not for the heck of writing or just getting it published, right? And that is why we've seen that most of us who've tried to dabble into science writing, communication, right, have not gone for a long time. It requires persistence. And may I also tell you one thing? With such a large country where we have so many scientists, technologists, people who have passion for writing science and technology. I mean, to my knowledge, I haven't seen any place where there is a dedicated full-time undergraduate or a postgraduate course that talks about science communication, science popularization, and extension. There were few that came up. There were few that closed down. There were few that have come up again. There are few that are interspersed in the courses of mass communication and journalism. But as such, there are very, very few at undergraduate or a postgraduate level. I would say catch them young. It will be important for us to ensure that we start, while we teach literature, we should also try to teach S&T literature if there are students in 11th and 12th wanting to, take up science and technology. And I tell you, the best way to learn science for them would be when they write something, what they've understood, if they write, and if there's somebody who can check them. And that would be great. It's just not what you've studied and just you've written. We all know that every course after 13 years of teaching, rote learning, gets exhausted, and there is something new that keeps emerging. That's a worldwide trend, and we should understand this. This is the most important thing. So it's when we talk about creating science, technology, communication, popularization, and when I say extension, doesn't just mean outreach. It's like getting into everybody, every nook and corner. And in order to do so, it will be very important that we catch them young at the school level. And there could be, and at college level as well, like in first year of engineering, where I studied all physics, chemistry, everything. It becomes important for us to ensure some credit courses in writing, so that whatever they've studied, at least if they can reproduce, it will give a crystal clear understanding to the teacher and the taught, both about what they're doing. So having emphasized this, it becomes important for us that we, as all of us, need to work together, shoulder to shoulder. It's just not a responsibility of a single organization or a single person or a single group of people. It's time for us to come out of our silos, try to work together. And I'll share one example in this case. 3 years ago, when we started our mission of taking scope into different languages, Bangla, due to my umbilical connections, we got our first major conference on scope in a CGCRI about 3 years ago. And I remember what we did was we just called different groups of people, government, non-government, volunteers, media, everybody. And we divided, sliced and diced the entire 2-day program into different sections with people from all walks came up and spoke. The interesting part was Bengal, we all know, has led science and technology, right? No, from days much before we got independence. And to my surprise, there were more than 20, 25 such organizations that were working separately, exclusively in their own areas. And they were all working for science and technology, communication, popularization, extension in Bangla. So this was the situation in West Bengal. When we moved to different states, the situation wasn't different. So it's important for us to have forums, we have organizations that can bring them together, bind them together, not at state level, but at national level. Because I tell you, there's so much of content that is available. There's so much of work that has been done. And I'll take a pause here because I just lost a very dear, very silent, unsung hero of science communication popularization about 3 days ago. Professor Satyabachi Sar is a person who has written numerous books on mathematics, not in English, but in Bangla. We lost him 2 days ago. So we have enormous such unsung heroes that we can just go look for the books that they have written. Their style of writing is something, and there's nothing bad in emulating anybody. The best that you can get, because all that we've learned, as I was trying to say, that there doesn't exist any formal school of training. So we have to rely on one, and the only thing that is left is by virtue of experience that we all possess, the huge repository that we possess. Way back in 1992, when I joined what is called NISPER today as the Publications and Information Directorate at that point in time, these magazines, Science Reporter, Vigyan Pragati, and Science Ki Duniya. So I joined one of them as an assistant editor at that point in time. Javed Bhai, who's sitting here, Pallav Bagla, Kolegal Sharma, Dilip Salvi, Dr. G.P. Phonke, Viman Basu, Shaibal Nag. The list is long. That was a time when, and we've all seen how Illustrated Weekly, Dharmyug, Saptaik, Hindustan, big ships have sunk. There used to be a magazine by Times of India called Science Today. It was an extremely very well done magazine, and we had a number of them at that point. But have we realized why have all these big ships sunk? What is the status of our magazines today? So it's time for us to come up again. And I've seen there are people passionate about it who've done a lot from their side to, they've done it from their pocket, all by sheer passion, nothing else, whether it sells or not. In this regard, I would like to mention Professor Aslam Parvez, who's been bringing Science, a magazine in Urdu, relentlessly, regularly, every month. And he says Urdu readers are always kept away because there is not much being published in Urdu. So he understood that. So having said this, I think it's time to expand the scope. And for this, all of us need to come. We need to speak. We need to tell the owners of big newspapers, and we'll have to impress and emphasize that if they have a question, if they have an answer saying that they have a reason or they have an alibi saying that we do not get articles. So from this forum, I request Professor Chandrama Shah to allow me to request everyone out here that at least anything that you read, forget it whether it is time relevant or not, something that appeases you, something that you like, something that you can think out of. There are many of us who love numbers. Put them in an interesting way, bring up an article in Science and do that. I'll share my example. I was in my master's in computer sciences, and there was a subject called discrete mathematics. The book that I wrote was full of illustrations. And I got zapped. And I said, when I first stepped into PID at that point in time, I spoke with Kolegal Sharma, who was the assistant editor of Science Reporter, and asked him, Sharmaji, is there a possibility if I could write an article on mathematics? And that is where a small 6 article series called Journey into Mathematics came into shape. And those were the days when we used to get postcards as responses, unlike emails now. Trust me, I had this much of postcards, responses personally written to me. Forget the others that would have come to Science Reporter. So I always keep talking about this, and I do mention this at all forums because that is something which has been very close to my heart ever since I got started. I take you back to my 9th standard in a Hindi book that I read. We all know Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya. He's the one who went around, got BHU established with no penny in his pocket. He scouted for money, he got money, and he did that. And what he said was that देश के हर द्वार पर एक दाता खड़ा है, देश के हर द्वार पर एक दाता खड़ा है, पर कमी उन हाथों की है जिसमें वो अपनी भेंट दे सके. Everybody is willing to give you, but it is up to us to draw it. So this is where I invoke all of you to rekindle the spirit of writing and ensuring that we, do this not only for us, not only for the society, but for the country. Because what we write today, and if it is good, through our social media will go across the national boundaries. And that would be something of great contribution, not to yourself, not to your family, not to your clan, but to the country. It's not about, trying to invoke any nationalist feeling here, but this is about our relevance of scientific social responsibility, something akin to what we've been hearing called CSR, the corporate social responsibility. We're not there doling out money. We're doling out knowledge. We're doling out something that we think is emphatic and will make a change to the society that we want. Our constitutional requirement talks about creating scientific awareness, scientific inquiry, a society which is has a scientific approach to it. Scientific approach is just not going into labs and doing science, but in every walk of life, if we can have a way which is away from all kinds of, superstitions, thoughts, ideas, and bring up a society where we ourselves practice it and encourage others to do it. So I'll take a quick round of what we have done at Vigyan Prasad. About 3.5 years ago, we decided that we would immediately launch our science channel. Science channel at that point in time, when we talk about in video, is Doordarshan, because being a government organization. But at Doordarshan, we were just given a slot, an hour slot. And we had content and we had aspirations to go massive, big, because unless in a country with so huge a population, it becomes important for all of us to cater to it. So, and for that matter, it was important to get onto a platform that would cater to it. And I'm glad to say that we were ahead of the curve. We jumped onto the bandwagon and we were there. And that is where we launched India's first science and technology OTT channel. Doordarshan and many others have now started to follow the suit. They are now planning to come up with an OTT channel, which we did about 3.5 years. It's not that I'm trying to boast about it, but this tells you that science and technology communication has a channel called India Science. And for all of you who've not ever seen that, I handholdedly request you to please download it. It's free. It's available on your Android and Apple Play stores. So that is where we have more than 3,700 films, a record that I think we've broken the Bollywood record as well, and we keep doing it. And we now have a critical mass to also run a 24/7 DTH channel as well. Having said this, science on television is not new to Vigyan Prasar. We've been creating a lot of science content previously. We used to have Lok Sabha TV, Rajya Sabha TV, and every week, I'm sure you would have it seen our Science Monitor programs. We had series of programs called Eureka. Similarly, on radio, we've been continuously working and coming up with a 52 episode series every year on different topics. We just recently concluded one on artificial intelligence called Welcome Tomorrow, Aane Wala Kal, in more than 20 Indian languages that was broadcast from 119 medium wave stations and 14 FM stations. The journey goes on. We've been writing, collating, aggregating, editing, and producing science news for the media for a long time. Our India Science Wire, or the Indian Science and Technology News Feature Service, is something that has been there for a while, and we continuously produce stories that are picked up by major media. Having said this, it's important for us to ensure that when we go around talking about communicating science, we do create a lot of clubs, network in the country. I'm glad to say my colleague, ex-colleague, Dr. Arvind Ranade, had spearheaded this program. And under his able leadership, we were able to get more than 4,000 such clubs in a very short period of time. We've also done work in other areas as well. We continue to produce toys and do-it-yourself kits as well. I know we've got a paucity of time, and I would request all of you, because the list of things that Vigyan Prasar has done in the past, and for last 32 years, relentlessly, it has been working. We've been also organizing and been a part of large, huge nationwide events as well. The Vigyan Sarvatra Pujyate, a program that we had done at 75 locations simultaneously for 7 days in across the country, was something on theme-based programs every day that we had. The report that I've received is a humongous one and shows the kind of support, liking that we have. So we have a huge, thirsty audience waiting us. It's up to us to walk up, find out avenues, explore them, and take it to them. I think we have massive plans of expansion at all organizations that work in this direction. CSIR NISPER is a great organization that has worked for many years, much before any other organization existed. And not through their magazines, not through their popular science publications, but also through various activities that they've done in the past. So now that you have this Vigyan Prasar, you have NISPER, you have many other institutions, and you have a lot of NGOs that do work. One such organization, which is a very small, very humble organization in Kolkata, which helps students make films using their handheld devices, is called Vichitra Pathshala. So, I mean, there are many such Vichitra Pathshalas that work quietly head down with a great impact to the society. Science, scope through theater, scope through films, scope through news, scope through languages. The canvas is huge. We've also gotten started with something akin to the Jaipur Literature Festival, and our literature festival, Science Literature Festival, is called Vigyanika. I must compliment my colleagues, Dr. Kapil Tripathi, Manvardhan Kant, who've gotten this thought and idea converted into a reality. We have conducted a number of science poetry recitals, science Kavi Sammelans, where people not only from India, but from outside the India have participated in a big way. And this clearly shows the kind of, love, the kind of thirst, the hunger that we have for science communication. If I've exceeded, I sincerely apologize. But I really want to thank the entire team of INSA-SERB, and especially the President INSA, Professor Chandrama Shah, to have given me this opportunity to share my thoughts, ideas. For anything that you wouldn't have liked, please forgive me. But on this note, I think it's our responsibility collectively to expand the scope of scope. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parashar, for this wonderful scenario of the science communication in our country. You had in your presentation almost something for almost everybody. For the young students and for the young science writers, you have told them what all they could write about and the care they should take. They should keep the audience in mind, they should keep the medium in mind, and accordingly they should use their language, their format, or the style in which they would be speaking. He also had something for the educationists and for the science and education managers, because he suggested that when we teach literature, we should also tell them about the science and technology literature, and without that, the education will not be complete. He has given an overview of the variety of activities that Gyan Prasar and other organizations have been pursuing during the past several decades. There have been several initiatives taken by them, and now we can, with pride, we can say that there are 4,000 films that Gyan Prasar has made for the OTT and other channels. So thank you so much, Dr. Parashar, and I'm sure that the audience has a lot of curiosities, and I can see that the number is 222. I think that means almost everyone who registered, and perhaps a few extra people have also joined this program. I'm so thankful to everybody and to the President for the guidance and to the experts for all their cooperation. So I would invite any queries or questions from the audience for this speaker, Dr. Nakul Parashar, Director of Gyan Prasar. There are questions in the chat box, and some of those questions would be read out by Dr. Seema Mandal.
Actually, they have appreciated his talk. Such.
Manoj Wage, he has written that, Dr. Parashar, I appreciate your viewpoint. In the view, which is one thing that hinders promotion of scientific thinking or change of mindset towards science in our country? Is it the preparedness or willingness or missing infrastructure? The question is for Dr. Parashar.
Yeah, Manoj, thank you so much. I guess it's all three. It's all preparedness, willingness, and missing of infrastructure. And for that, I guess all of us, irrespective of wherever we are, whether we are in government sector, we are in non-government, we're in private sector, or we are on our own as well. I think it is where we have to come out. We'll have to come out of comfort zones. We'll have to not only do this by writing, but also, ensuring that we have a direct communication with people in different parts, organizing such meetings, organizing, discussions, bringing them to fore, getting regular exhibitions, expos where people will come by is very important. And once this whole mix of things gets the required momentum, I'm sure it will snowball into what we all look forward. We look forward to a society which is scientifically aware and has a different thought process, very crystal clear thought process, very structured thought process, unlike that it's time that we cannot be living in any amorphous society so far. So it's important for us to get, and being from science and technology, it makes more sense for us to lead by example. And when we say lead by example, it means that we ourselves have to do it, apply it on ourselves, and then take it forward. So in a country like this, I guess it's important for us, for someone to take this lead. So all those organizations, all those people who've already gotten to a point where they're recognized, I would invoke them and I would request them to come forward, take that leadership and steer it through. And for that matter, since we have so many states, I think if we can do that in a state manner or a federal manner, I'm sure we'll certainly succeed. And once we do this, missing infrastructure would also be taken care of.
Thank you, Dr. Parasha. There are some more questions. One question is from Mr. Surendra Singh. Is there any learning site for how to write the science for communication, popularization, and extension? Is there any learning site?
There are a number of such sites that are available that talk about, there are a lot of material that is available on the web. We have a lot of books that are available. There are a lot of content which has been there for a long time. So, I mean, if you write in English, you have a number of style manuals, you have a number of books that people have written. Vigyan Prasar, for that matter, has produced a number of books. You can visit Vigyan Prasar's website and you can find those handbooks that are available, be it for pure science, could it be for agriculture, could it be for technology. So there are umpteen such attempts where people have made. I recall a book in Hindi on journalism, science writing by Dr. Ramesh Dutt Sharma, which is available, which is quite a nice book. We have many such attempts which have been done. We have a handbook by Abhay Rajput that we have already produced. So for that matter, the one point shop and a point that I can think of would be Vigyan Prasar's website. NISPER has also produced a number of such work. You can certainly look for them. And then we have number of bodies. We have a body called Vigyan Parishad in Prayag, which has a lot of content which is available. Besides this, there's a huge repository of articles on how to write science for different masses, for different audiences as well.
Thank you, Dr. Parasha. There is another, can you go back to the video? There is another question, and the person wants to ask, it showcases all the work done by Vigyan Prasad particularly, and Government of India in general for popularization of science in India. Still more efforts needs to be taken. It's just a comment. The next one. And the next one has also congratulated Dr. Parasha for this wonderful, lucid and nice presentation. And the vision, he says, is clear. And wants to ask, would appreciate if you could enlighten us with information regarding where to publish and how to hone the craft of pitching the idea, etc.
There are different magazines, at least for science communication popularization. We have a very popular magazine called Arivial Palagai in Tamil, which is now being prescribed by the state government for their 6,500 schools. For that, you could approach Tamil Nadu Science and Technology Center and our representative B. Shri Kumar, and he would be able to help you. Somebody has asked about submitting a popular article in Vigyan Katha. Vigyan Katha is a Bengali news magazine, science news magazine, and a popular science magazine of Vigyan Prasar in Bangla. You can certainly write, you have the address available on our website. You could visit our website and write to them and submit your articles to Dr. Rentu Nath and Professor Bhupati Chakravarti, and that is for Bangla. Similarly, we have many other languages. We have monthly magazines in many other languages, and they are available on our sites. Their addresses are available on our site. And in case if you miss them, please feel free to write to me at nakul.parasha@gmail.com.
There is another query, and Mr. Manish Mohan has pointed out that STP 2020 says that every science department and institute must have a science communication unit. So he says that he thinks that any unit in any department is working, they must be encouraged to flourish. And he says, I hope that Dr. Parashar may add something to that.
No, there's not much to add, Manishji. I totally endorse what you have said. And it is important, necessary for all of us to ensure if we have such a department in every organization, let's support it by providing articles to it. Because if we don't support content to these people, it becomes very difficult for them to sustain and keep this science communication thing on and running.
Okay. There is another question, how to submit popular articles to Vigyan Katha?
I just said for Vigyan Katha, we have our names, Professor Bhupati Chakravarti, Dr. Rentunath. They're available on the website and you can certainly write to them. And we'll be glad to, after we receive a number of articles almost on a weekly basis. So give us time to go through because we have a team that vets and takes that particular article on the basis of the relevance for that particular month.
Our IT in charge, Mr. Karthikeyan, has suggested that for a while, the audience may unmute themselves if they want to ask some questions. Then there is a question by Mr. Kunal. And the question is there any program for at Vigyan Prasar, like making videos by experts for training the science teachers, particularly at the primary and secondary level, because they are going to develop scientific thinking in the students?
I couldn't hear it.
The question from Mr. Kunal is there any program you are looking for at Vigyan Prasar, like making videos by experts for training the science teachers, particularly at the primary and secondary level, because they are going to develop scientific thinking among the students?
No, certainly. I mean, there's a huge repository of films that is available on our website. And this is not only the India science films, those 3,700 plus films, but we also have a large repository of films that we have produced in the past for schools. We would be more than glad to add new to them, and we would certainly appreciate if the person who's asked this question can be in touch with us, can contact us, and we'll be more than happy to discuss, deliberate, and ideas. Any idea that can help expand the scope is welcome.
Thank you. If anybody wants to ask a question, one can raise one's hand. This is a presentation from Mr. Nirupam Singh to everyone. And then there is a question from Kiran. The question is there any platform for government school children which can compete with apps like Byju's?
Well, we wouldn't want to get into school teaching, training, but we would certainly provide material to enhance the understanding, training, so on and so forth. And for that matter, we have enough content at the moment. I wouldn't say enough is enough, but there's always room for more and more. But whatever content that we have created is available at our website and is available in India Science. Please have a look at it. And in case, if you think you want to repurpose it, just write to us and we'll help you provide all possible support, help, rights, permissions that are required to do so.
Then there are just two more questions we will take up because time is short. And Mr. Palla Bagla has also joined here. We are so happy about that. What about the marketing of Vigyan Prasar and Whisper Publications? That's one question.
Well, I would say NISPER has a very strong marketing arm, and I've been witnessing it since I joined it way back in 1992. And Vigyan Prasar too has its marketing wing through various science fairs, book fairs that we've always been participating at events and expos. We've always been there, and somehow for reasons galore, Vigyan Prasar has been an integral part of major events that have happened so far, whether it is an India International Science Festival or whether it is any other such expo fair that has happened. So our marketing does happen through various ways. We have now gotten our GST and other things as well, and we should certainly be getting onto the online mode, and we'll be partnering with all the online sellers very soon.
Thank you so much. There are still more questions, but I don't think we have time to take up all of them. But I must congratulate Dr. Nakul Parashar for presenting so lucidly, so comprehensively, not only the working of Vigyan Prasar, but the whole scenario of science communication in the country and the way it has lived from nowhere to everywhere in a period of a few decades. There's something really great and speaks for the great work which Vigyan Prasar is doing. And a number of questions also suggest the tremendous interest that has been generated in the country, and especially after this talk now, that people are taking interest in science communication. Whatever questions are pending, I'm sorry we cannot take them up right now, but please write those questions at the same email at which you had applied for this workshop, and we will make sure we forward those questions to Dr. Nakul Parashar, and he will be answering to them individually. So thank you very much, Dr. Parashar, for this wonderful presentation, and we all join in applauding you. And as I just said, our updated science expert, Pallabaja Saab, has also joined, a very well-known personality in the country, whether it be television, whether it be videos, whether it be written science communication. So we welcome him also. And our next speaker for this lecture session is another distinguished personality, an international personality, I would say, Ms. Shubhra Priyadarshini. She is associated with as chief editor with Nature India and also with the Springer. And I would request Dr. Pratapi Chakrabarty to please introduce Ms. Shubhra Priyadarshini.
Thank you, sir. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Shubhra Priyadarshini, Chief Editor of Nature India. Ms. Priyadarshini has been a British Chevening Scholar, a Robert Bosch Fellow, an IBEX UNESCO Fellow, and a Kavli Prize Media Scholarship Award. Shubhra received the BBC World Service Trust Award for her coverage of the vanishing island of Sundarbans in the Bay of Bengal, and the PANOS South Asia Media Excellence Award for her incisive coverage of climate change issues. She won acclaim in India for her coverage of the Orissa super cyclone in 1999 and the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004. Ms. Shubhra is the founding president of the Science Journalist Association of India, SJAI. She trains Indian scientists and science and health journalists through science communication workshop, Fact and Feed, a Google News supported initiative to combat medical misinformation. She is lead faculty at Nature India, Sangat Bhopal's Health Ethics Communication course, mentor for the World Federation of Science Journalists supported Himalayan Climate Boot Camp in the Everest region, and a mentor for a climate change fact check training jointly run by GNI Data Leads and SJSAI. She is also known for her podcast. May I request now Ms. Priyadarshini to deliver her lecture.
Thank you very much for that quite glorious introduction. It's my pleasure. Thank you, INSA-SERB, for having me here. I come from a slightly different genre of science communication, which is the other side, like my friend Pallav, from journalism. So I would give you my perspectives of what science communication looks like from this side of the fence. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Loud and clear. Yes.
Okay, lovely. Thanks. So let me just begin by saying that science communication has been something that we all have passionately pursued for long years now, and its need and essential sort of display in our societies is something we have passionately advocated also for long. Why scientists should also be effective communicators is also something that the previous speaker, Nakul Parashar, has talked about, and I agree fully with his views about why it is so much upon us as scientists to sort of also go out there and communicate our science. Are you able to hear me? I can see some perplexed faces.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
I'm okay? Okay, fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So let me go ahead and share my screen and see if you can see it in full screen mode. Are you able to see this now? Yeah? All right. So what we'll talk about today is why it is essential to communicate your science to the publics, like Nakul Parashar also mentioned, and also why the pandemic actually gave us food for thought about bringing science communication to the core of the discourse on science as well. So I'll take you back a bit into history, because I'm essentially a storyteller, as you just heard. I'll tell you a little story to begin with, and then we'll come back to pandemic and how it has impacted how we look at science communication. Let me tell you a small story. On your screen right now, you can see two legends. One is British physiologist Robert Edward and Indian physician Subhash Mukherjee. Their scientific passions were identical, and they created the world's first test tube babies through in vitro fertilization. Edwards was the first ever, and Mukherjee's perhaps the second, but there are claims contrary to that, so we don't exactly know whether he created this world's second IVF baby. But these two scientists led starkly different lives from one another. And the culmination of their scientific journeys was also quite divergent. So one got the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine in 2010, and long years after he actually made his history-making accomplishment of the IVF baby, while the other was pushed by caustic peer rebuff into suicide inside the very house that doubled up as his laboratory of his life's greatest work. The setting of this story is back in the late 1970s, when the world was yet to warm up to the idea of an artificially created human being. These two men were separated by continents, as you know. One was in Cambridge and Oldham in the UK, and the other was in Calcutta, India. And they were quietly scripting two different stories that would later, long years later, stir up a prolonged debate on scientific ethics, morality, and the future of the human race, of course. And like most scientific breakthroughs, long after this cacophony around their discoveries died down, the world realized that it had received a gift unparalleled in history of biology. That was a human life actually created inside a test tube or a petri dish, to be more precise. Edwards' technique involved sort of laparoscopically pulling egg cells out of a woman and fertilizing them in a petri dish and implanting the embryo back into her womb. But Mukherjee used hormones and stimulated the ovaries to make extra eggs. Then he harvested those eggs through an easier method, that is a small incision in the vagina, and fertilized those eggs in a petri dish, and then froze the embryos before he transplanted them into the woman's womb. Why? Details about these two people, and what relevance does it have to our topic today of science communication? The story here is that for Subhash Mukherjee, the Calcutta physician, it was a constant lonely battle, not just to pool resources, to be able to perform his frugal experiments, but also to prove his the sheer absurdity of his ideas then to his scientific peers and of course the government of that time. On the other hand, Robert Jeffrey Edwards, the Englishman from Yorkshire, also faced some sort of hostility, including from the Vatican, for destroying more life as unused embryos than creating life. And of course, a barrage of lawsuits, etc., for taking nature into his hands. But his story was different from Subhash Mukherjee because he was able to publish in some of the very important journals of the time, and his work was chronicled duly, whereas Subhash Mukherjee's work was largely restrained to his lab and to some of his notes. He did publish, but not in very well-known journals, which actually went against him later in life. So these two stories, it's a story of the method of science and of peer review, that gold standard yardstick, which makes or mars the acceptability and veracity of science. And it could be a great case study for science communication. So while this was happening, these two test tube babies were making history. Using IVF, Louis Brown was born, Edwards and Steptoe gave the world its first test tube baby, Louis Brown, in 1978, 25th of July, at the Oldham General Hospital. And close on the heels, Mukherjee also struck gold after many unsuccessful attempts to create a human embryo in his home refrigerator. He didn't have the wherewithal to create, an expensive infrastructure or a great lab to create all of this. And baby Durga, whose original name was Kanupriya Agarwal, was born to Bela Agarwal in a private nursing home in Kolkata on 3 October 1978. So what went right for Edwards and what went wrong for Mukherjee is a case study in science communication. Much of this can be explained by the disparity of the socio-cultural and geographical settings of these scientific endeavors. Almost 8,000 kilometers apart, these two scientists worked in incredibly diverse settings. One in left-leaning Calcutta of the 1970s, which was infamous for its disenchantment for enterprise of any kind, and Oldham and Cambridge in England, the mecca of learning and intrepid ideas, if you will. So this is a story that always elicits a lot of reactions from people who know the story. And of course, it's also a story that sets the tone for today's talk. In short, Edwards worked towards a hypothesis and scripted a flawless narrative through his communication, but Subhash Mukherjee faced flack because he couldn't do that. Now we know that this is the difference between where they worked as well. The kind of infrastructure they had, the kind of backing from the government they had for communicating their science, the kind of resources they could fall back upon during the time that they were making these history-making discoveries. So the damaging error here was that Subhash Mukherjee went to the media without having published his findings in a journal, and that is what took a toll on his later hearings with the legal departments of the Calcutta the West Bengal government at that time. And of course, these were avant-garde ideas. And so each of these stories, similar stories, that can have a bearing because of the geographical settings they were created in, are stories of great science communication. So let's come to why this story matters and why science is a hydra-headed being and why we as scientists should be more aware of what kind of communication we pick up for our sciences, for our discoveries, for our incremental or even big breakthrough kind of stories. So we all know that science, of course, touches most things around us, and it's something that also touches the prevalent social norms, politics, economics, the culture and geography of the place, just as in the example that we discussed right now. It also has taught us historically that we have to ignore science communication at our own peril. It is not just important to tell our stories, our scientific findings to reach people, but also to scotch pseudoscience, to scotch misinformation, to bring our science to public knowledge, to make sense of the funding that we get as scientists, because we are using public funds and we are responsible for the science that we do. And a subset of that, of course, is the communication that we do. So we will no longer have to be, content with putting science communication in the basket of soft skills. It is no longer that, unless we all understand the need for it to become an essential skill. We will be losing out on a bunch of things that people who do science communication will actually be able to do. So what has COVID-19 taught us? And why is it contemporary for us to understand the immediate needs for for science communication after COVID-19? What did we learn? Excuse me. We learned that at least people in the communication business, more so in journalism, we all learned that there is a lot of uncertainty that we have to communicate every day. Something that we know as true today may not hold true tomorrow. So how do we communicate that uncertainty of science? Science does not have all the answers all the times. The imponderables or the questions that are being constantly asked of science keep changing every day. And so just as science isn't constant, these answers are also not constant. So we have to be very aware of that. We have to be aware that communication of science is not something that is written on stone. It can change tomorrow. The criteria can change. The truth, like we know today, can change tomorrow. Also, during COVID-19, all of us saw how, epidemiology or the spike protein or, the medication, vaccines, drug doses, all of these became very common knowledge, and people were talking at home about these things. So the public gaze, if you will, was strictly on science, and its communication therefore became so much more important. Everybody had questions to ask of science. Everybody was using scientific terminology in their daily lingo, and so the limelight, the spotlight was on science, and it became even more important that the right communication was done at this time. It was also important for people like us not to create a situation where the lay public got, any kind of panic. It induced our communication should not always induce, headlines that are panic-stricken or can result in people getting afraid of using a drug or a vaccine, or just going with science, or the trust in science is dwindling. So that, of course, needs training and skill, and the kind of limitations that each of these COVID-19 related sciences had, that to communicate those uncertainties and unanswered questions also needed some skill and needed to be communicated alongside the hope that these brought. It also became very imperative, like we all saw in media reports throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, that questions were raised about the transparency of governments across the world, about WHO's data, about so many other things that we earlier thought were cast in stone. So those questions were raised because a lot of communication was hush-hush. So that actually gives us a pointer to why science communication should not be hush-hush, why everything should be transparent and honest when we communicate, when we tell the stories of science, when it means reaching out to a huge number of people whose lives might be might be impacted by the communication that we do. So it does not hurt to say we do not know, or we are sorry, we goofed up, or we know just this much about this science right now. It's absolutely fine. However, it's always important, and I think it is not just important, it is essential that we do that honestly and transparently. It helps always in creating public trust in science and an atmosphere that makes for people supporting the regulations that are imposed on them. For instance, if we just say something like, from tomorrow we are imposing a curfew or a ban or a lockdown because we think it is essential, without telling them what exactly led to this decision, what science lies behind this decision, then people would be skeptical. People might raise questions. So it's always important, and it's a lesson drawn from COVID, that we are transparent and honest about the science, and then people would be way more responsible about the regulations. It taught us, COVID-19 taught us how we as science communicators and scientists use data very creatively. We all know about this very famous graph now. It's the flatten the curve chart. And this is a very simple chart, but it illustrates the story so strongly, so beautifully. It just tells us that, if we do these things, then we can bring down the number of cases effectively very fast through these interventions, these public health measures. So it's very important for us to be able to illustrate our storytelling through very simple techniques that is understandable by people, by our audiences, the ones we are catering to. So, and of course, it can drive social change so much more responsibly and ethically. I'll stop by telling you about how COVID-19 actually showed us the importance of science being so intertwined with society, economics, and politics. We saw all of that being played out in the vaccine story of how the global South and the global North were divided about this. We saw the politics around vaccine. We saw the economics of drugs and vaccines. We saw the large scale, panning out of our immunization program for the first time in history. And all of that was backed by solid science. So how science that you do is so important, and this is not just big ticket science like COVID-19. It could be even what you think as a very small or incremental change that you are bringing about in your lab. It could actually turn out to be quite a big deal in international spheres. So do not judge your science. Do not judge the importance of your science before trying to see if it is worth communicating. Go ahead and do that anyway. You don't know what could be in store. Also, we know that it's a super connected world. Peer-reviewed science and fiction or conspiracy theories travel at the same speed, or at many times actually misinformation travels at a greater speed than science, because the rigors of science, the methods of science take a long time for it to be communicated, but misinformation doesn't need to be rigorous. It can be communicated in real time, and scientists are busy doing other things, so they find it difficult in real time to scotch pseudoscience or scotch misinformation. But we should not forget, like COVID-19 taught us, and some scientists in this country actually formed beautiful, strong groups, robust groups to come forward and scotch misinformation. That is upon all of us. The onus is upon all of us to do that more effectively, more sincerely. And we all know that interdisciplinarity, of course, is important. So why is science communication important? We've discussed this already, but I'm just putting it out there for all of you to see. It is scotching pseudoscience. It is raising awareness of your particular discipline in the public. It is informing the public about your science. And all of you must have read a newspaper piece or a magazine when you were growing up, or a book that made you choose science as a career. And it inspires, of course, the next generation of researchers. So now is the time for you to come up and pick up that duty, that responsibility of inspiring the next generation of researchers through your science communication skills. There are some very practical, immediate benefits of communicating your science. You're, of course, developing a new skill, if not anything else. You are improving the quality of your research by letting it out in the public and networking and increasing the feedback on your science. You're increasing public, funding to your science. The next tranche of your funds of your grants could actually be dependent upon how well you communicate your science. It's become imperative in some countries like the UK and the US to have a column alongside, when you put forward your grant submission, they ask for the impact of your science. And in it, one of the components is science communication. So it would be, any day now that India thinks of a similar column that talks about how well you communicate your science. So I do think that even though if that column doesn't exist yet, it could always be important to add that science communication side of your skills to your grant proposals, to your stories of how much the government or the public funding bodies can support you. So the power of storytelling is something that I thought I should briefly take you through because this is a workshop that is catering to scientists and people interested in science communication. And I think something that you all should be aware of as my last request to all of you, if you will, or advocacy, is how can you as scientists make an immediate switch to science communication if you haven't yet begun? So you could involve people from multiple fields. We talked about multidisciplinarity being the future, interdisciplinarity being the future. If you have a press office in your institution or organization, try and reach out to them with your science or any science that you want to communicate. You could talk to people who have, public communication experience already and see if they are able to help you communicate your science. You could visit a newsroom. You could, sort of put in a request with an editor of a news publication or a scientific publication like ours, like Nature India. I'm very happy to, bring you into our office and show you how we do things, how we communicate science, how we how our reporters function, what kind of editorial meetings happen before we decide on some story to be picked up. So there's a lot going behind the scenes. It's always nice to sort of arm yourself with that knowledge. It helps when you approach science writing body or a science desk of a newspaper or a channel. Try and see if you can sit in one of the editorial meetings. I'm always happy to, bring anybody who's interested in coming into the office and sitting with our editorial team when we discuss these stories. Get some hands-on writing experience. And I always say that to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader first. So if you want to write fiction, we advocate as writers that you go ahead and read 10 books of science fiction and then formulate your own style of writing. You will understand by reading those 10 books what a style means. How do you embrace, what are the elements that these people focus on while writing? How do they develop a narrative? What are the important things that they are picking to tell a story? So it's always nice to be a good reader before you become a good writer. So in case you want to become a science communicator of popular science, you can read some popular science stories and see what kind of elements are in there. What is the intro like? What are the essential things that come in the body next? How do they end the story, etc.? What are the examples they're picking up? How they are de-jargonizing stuff, etc. And also pick up some press releases from your institutes and see how those press releases are written. It will give you a nice flavor of how to write your own. You could have your own web page or your own blog. For that, also try to read some popular blogs, international science blogs that are interesting and give a lot of importance to the three most important things in science writing: accuracy, brevity, and clarity. So A for accuracy, B for brevity, and C for clarity, the ABC of great science writing. So I'll end with that and take questions, if any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Subraji, for this wonderful presentation. And this again had something for everybody. And she gave a very great Guru Mantra to everybody present here. And she said that, number one, it doesn't hurt to say we do not know, or we only know this little at the moment. And this would have saved world a lot of lives had this approach been adopted. She also suggested that to increase the public trust in science, it's important that public should always be informed and they should be involved in the decision making. The COVID experience has been a great learning experience for everybody, not only for the scientists, not only for the public, but also for administrators and everybody involved, because science has a very close connection with the society, and the COVID period has established it so very well. She has advised the prospective or the willing science writers to go and meet the reporters, to visit the newsrooms, and also to write news release for themselves. And this will be kind of a hands-on learning which they can have. So thank you so much. And there are some questions. Of course, there are compliments here from Gautam. There is a compliment that it was a wonderful lecture, madam. And then Dr. Vasudha Mishra has thanked her for this beautiful presentation and leading us into the world of science communication with your engaging presentation and storytelling. Could you please shed some light on how one can start out in the world of science and health journalism?
Yeah, sure. So science journalism is a field, like my previous speaker also said, there are not many avenues for science communication or journalism. Sorry. There are not many professional avenues, if you will, but if you are good at what you do, you will surely find a lot of avenues. So how do you start? You could do it two ways. One way it would be to take professional training, like get into a course of science journalism or health journalism, which is available in a number of universities all across the world. There's a great free course on science journalism in the World Federation of Science Journalists.
Excuse me, may I request all the distinguished participants to please keep your mic mute unless...
Dr. Swapna, could you please mute yourself?
Centrally. Dr. Anande, mute it centrally.
Request all the participants to please mute themselves, or we will have to send you out of the room. Please switch off your microphone. Ma'am, please continue.
Sure. So I think one way, as I was saying, is to get formal training, but I know that most established science journalists do not have, and many of us do not have formal training in science journalism. We just found our path through journalism into specializing in science. One great course that I can recommend, it's free, is the World Federation of Science Journalism course, which is on their website, wfsj.org. It's a free module. I think it has 8 or 9 modules. You can take it and figure out if you're cut out for, science journalism. If you think that you can relate to most of that course and are able to do justice to the modules there, that could be a good beginning point. The Sangat Bhopal that was mentioned during my introduction course, I lead a course on health journalism alongside Sangat Bhopal. It starts its cohorts every 6 months, and it will be open for the next cohort sometime in August or September. So you could look out for that on Sangat Bhopal's Twitter feed and Nature India's Twitter or social media feed. If you're interested, the course fee is nominal, and you can join that course as well. It's the first course on health communication and ethics. So it's actually catered to towards already practicing health professionals who want to communicate, just like scientists who want to communicate. So that involves some modules on ethics, on communication, and the teachers there are very well-known names like Dr. Shahid Jamil, Professor Gautam Menon, and lots of other people from the health communication bandwagon. So feel free to check that out as well. But I would say that even without a formal course, if you really have the knack for writing, and writing is basically the core of all communication, because there could be video, there could be podcasts, there could be everything, but at the core of it is also a script. For video also you need a script. For audio also you need a script. And all of that boils down to good writing. So I would say that if you are a good writer, have a good skill in presenting scientific facts very popularly and without the crisp jargons of science, then I think you really can do that on your own.
Thank you. There are quite a few compliments which I will not be reading out, but everybody has said a wonderful presentation. And then there is a dear madam, thanks for your wonderful presentation and with illustrations. Is there any support for publishing in regional languages like Assamese and Telugu? This is a question from NL Raju.
Yeah, I think that India Science Wire has set up a great format for publishing in regional languages. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that Assamese is something they do. I know that one of my mentees at the Nature India Media Science Fellowships, Paramanand Burman, does a lot of Assamese, communication. So I don't know exactly where I think he's at the science communication wing right now. I'm not very sure where he is, but I do know that Gubi Labs also used to do regional communication of science, and Kolegal Sharma was mentioned earlier. He is a brilliant science writer in the regional languages in Malayalam, I think, or Kannada. Is he in Malayalam?
Yeah, Kannada.
In Kannada. Yeah. So I think these people do set the notion that science communication can be done so effectively in regional languages, and they are doing it so well. So I do think that getting in touch with India Science Wire and people like Javed ji would be nice for you to sort of get a toehold into regional science communication.
Thank you. There are compliments from Shruti, from Hari, from Vartika Jain. I will not be reading them out, but they all say this was very insightful, well illustrated, and very clear presentation. And there is a question from Papri Das, who says that, ma'am, as a PhD student, from where should I start my writing?
Okay, so obviously you are much more concentrated in writing your manuscript right now as a PhD student about the work that you're doing. So that's a great starting point. I mean, I would say that writing a good manuscript itself is a great storytelling technique. These days, most of the leading journals, I can surely talk about Nature, what we are doing is the abstract of the manuscript is basically written in a format that can be understandable, that can be, that can be accessible to a scientist or a non-scientist in any discipline. So if you're an astrophysicist writing a paper, a neuroscientist can get the gist of what you're trying to tell by reading just the abstract. So that's how, leading journals are now looking at communicating their manuscripts, their scientific articles, science articles. So I would say if you can do justice to your PhD, while you're doing your PhD, you're obviously trying to also publish in a good science journal at that time. If you can do that effectively, if you can write about your own PhD work also parallelly in a popular format, that is a great place to begin. And then you can start sending that story to either places like the government's science communication channels, or even to newspapers, or to Nature India, where the pitch is very important. For newspapers, the pitch is important because editors are looking at a bunch of stories every day. So to sell, and I use that word sell, to sell your story, why should they look at your story, and why should they pick your story over 100 other stories that are on their desk? You have to make it really crisp, and you have to sell it well. You have to make them understand the importance of that science piece as it should appear in their newspaper or media house. So do that well. Try to write a pitch that is very succinct, very crisp, very to the point, without really going into the history of that science or the future of that science. Just say what you are doing and what could be the practical implications of your work. If you can do that in 100 words, that would be a great place to start.
This, I guess, also answers Pranabha's question. Alpna Saha has commented that the importance of communicating science has been conveyed very clearly for the researchers and scientists. How can they be encouraged for taking it forward?
Sorry.
How can researchers and scientists be encouraged to take it forward?
How can they be encouraged? I think there has been a debate about, during the science policy, last science policy discussions on science communication, we had this debate about whether science communication should be made essential or mandatory for all scientists. I tend to think that it should not be made mandatory because, it is a skill that not everybody might want to exercise, right? But at the same time, like this question is, how can we encourage? It should always be desirable, not mandatory. You should, the government should surely make efforts to show that communicating your science has an edge over those who do not communicate their science. And how the government can do that is a long question to answer. There could be many ways of promoting science communication. One very effective way, I think, would be to give some extra points to people during their PhD or during their MSc, some credit points like Nakul Parashar also mentioned, some credit points for anybody who wants to take up a course on science communication or does science communication already by way of writing or videos or podcasts or whatever format, blogging, illustrations, photography. There are so many ways of communicating science, right? So one way to encourage would be that. The other way would be to, like I mentioned in my talk, to show them the practical benefits of why it could be a great skill to have in your repertoire. Why having science communication adds to your CV, adds to your skill sets, etc. So I think if these things can be done, there could be some way of encouraging science communication.
And I may add that there are national awards for science popularization given by NCSTC, Department of Science and Technology, and Indian National Science Academy. By the way, I can mention there are still 2 days left for those who want their nominations to be sent. This month end, they can send their nominations for the Science Popularization Medal being given by INSA. And in addition to what Dr. Shuklaji has said, and the greatest, I think, the achievement would be the self-satisfaction. Because she mentioned that if you want respect for science in the society, you must convey to them what science is about. Carl Sagan had said that if people don't understand or don't know about science, they will be either afraid of it or they will worship it like God. Neither is a very pleasant situation. So we have Ajay has asked another question, ma'am, how to communicate science to common people as current science is limited to only scientific community. Common people are still unaware of science and are under the strong influence of disbeliefs or misbeliefs, superstition, that is.
Yes, this is a long answer actually. And there is actually a course module on this in the health communication story that I just mentioned. So how do you build public trust in science is a big story, and there are very eminent people out there who can answer that better. But I just want to mention as a communicator that science is written in tough language as of now. It is delivered in a tough language. It sits in ivory towers. It doesn't always, wear the cloak of transparency. On the other hand, misinformation is delivered in a very easy to consume, snackable format. It is quick. It can be forwarded through WhatsApp, for instance. It is told in a language that appeals to most of us. You know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's still not over though, but at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, I would get WhatsApp forwards from my parents asking me if this is correct or not, you know, and I would have a tough time explaining to them that this is, you know, delivered in a very nice way. It's written in a very nice way. Somebody is doing a video in a very nice way about some misinformation about drugs or vaccines or even common remedies for COVID-19, etc. But so it's easy to consume. That is easy to consume. So you see the disparity between the two. Science is written in tough language, tough to consume, comes once in a while, takes a long time to materialize, but misinformation, on the other hand, is palatable, easy to deliver, and comes like wildfire. It can be disseminated very quickly in real time. So that disparity is very big to sort of bridge. And it is upon us, like I said earlier, communicators and scientists alike, to take up the onus of communicating science in real time during these kinds of emergencies. So public trust in science can be built only when we are transparent and honest about science and about the limitations of science alongside the hope, like I mentioned. So if we can do that, and if we can also communicate science in real time when misinformation is at its height, we can come up and say, these things are wrong. We don't have all the answers. We'll come back to you maybe in a week's time or 10 days time or whenever we have the answers, etc. So that is essential for people to, and it's not always nice for scientists to say, this is what science says, so you better believe it, like you mentioned right now. So that's not a happy place for anybody. That's not how trust can be built. And you always trust people who sort of, I know we are running past time, so I'll just wind up this answer. We always trust people who are closest to us, even if they are telling us a lie, right? So if scientists are not close enough to the public, how is that gap going to be bridged? For that, essentially, scientists will have to come and become closer to the public. So I'll end up there, and I think we are shooting past time for the panel. So I'm...
Yeah, with a lecture like this and with an audience like this, I think this session can go on endlessly. Just last question, we'll take it up. There are other questions. I request them to send them at the same email at which they had applied for registration. And this question is from Dr. S. That's all what it reads here. The comparison of the Oldham and the Kolkata stories were very touching, but at the same time, it emphasized need to be careful as to how to publicize one's science. I think this is something very important. She would like to comment, share. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. I just did mention that it's important how science is rigorous. It's step by step. You cannot bypass one step and do the other. So unless you have concrete results to report, it's always best not to report it. Unless you have a peer, I mean, we go by the gold standard of peer review, but there are other standards as well when you want to communicate science. So, so yeah, I think it's always good to stick to the step-by-step process of science before communicating.
So thank you very much for a wonderful session. And to the audience also a big thank you for asking so many questions. And there are still quite a few going on, but I think we'll have to stop it now. And later they can send those questions to INSA and we will pass them on to ma'am. And so thank you very much once again, Shubhraji, for this wonderful session. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And now we have another session for which also people have been waiting breathlessly. And the session is a group discussion on science writing, the current scenario and new trends. Just now we heard two experts, one from the science popularization and one with the Nature India and dealing with a lot of research inputs from the scientists. Now here we have a panel with three persons, all leaders in their respective fields. We have Professor Dr. Natesh, who has been with the Department of Biotechnology for very long. And before that, he was teaching at the University of Delhi. And later, he was involved in several divisions and oversaw the launch of important programs on conservation and management of bioresources, human resource development, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And he built robust international collaborations. And you perhaps would know that the Wellcome Trust DBT India Alliance was formulated during his period, and he was one of its two founding trustees. He also led a campaign which was very critical in bringing the overseas Indian bioscientists back to India through the Ramalingaswamy Re-Entry Fellowship. After his superannuation in 2012, Dr. Natesh serves as consultant advisor at the National Institute of Immunology, Delhi, and until recently also at Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. He has several technical publications in national and international journals, and his popular articles have also appeared in The Wire, Feminism in India, Sahapedia, and Economic Times. He received the Biospectrum Lifetime Achievement Award for his contributions towards taking the Indian bioscience sectors to new heights. And you would be glad to learn that a new plant species, Aponogeton nateshii, had been named in his honor. Of late, Dr. Natesh has been occupied with writing books and mapping the heritage trees of India, and is busy giving finishing touches to his book, Iconic Trees of India, which will be very soon published by Role Books. So I expect that all of you will be looking forward to launch of this book and will be reading it when it's published very soon. So I invite Dr. Natesh to first. The other two panelists with us are very distinguished people. We have Shri Hassan Javed Khan, who has already been briefly introduced, but I'll introduce him when his turn comes. And Shri Pallav Bagla, a well-known science photojournalist who writes, who broadcasts, who makes videos, and whose face you must have seen during many, many programs in the country. So first, I'm inviting Dr. S. Natesh to address us, and this will be followed by questions and queries from the audience. Dr. Natesh, please.
Good day to all of you. First of all, I'm very thankful to INSA and SERB for inviting me here, Dr. Chandrima Shah and Dr. Nautiyal. Compared to my two very distinguished panelists, I'm still a Johnny-come-lately to communications and science, actually, although I have been dabbling in it. But these two other people are past masters at it, and I'm sure I will learn a lot from their presentation as well. The two wonderful talks that went before have set the stage and made my task very easy. I was told that there are many youngsters who, in the audience, are very keen observers, and they have a great interest in becoming communicators in science. And I thought, and I was told that I should say something about what are the principles of effective communication in writing, actually. Let me start off by sharing my slides. So while the screen is being opened, take a okay. Share. Right. Double click. So I will concentrate on science writing in the limited time available to me. As you have heard from the two previous speakers, science communication has taken center stage in the last few months. We all know how it is so important to actually be very precise and accurate in communicating science to the society in general. I will first touch upon two broad categories of science writing. One would be science reports, which go under the name of papers or scientific papers, and the other would be popular articles. Now, scientific papers, as was mentioned also by previous speakers, are aimed at scientists via written reports, and these papers are published in professional magazines, which are called journals, as you know. And the ability to engage different audiences with research ideas and acquiring scientific grants, securing job, attracting media attention, and getting great papers, of course. It's very crucial for us to communicate well in science through science writing. So much collective knowledge resides within these papers, and learning to effectively write and interpret scientific literature are actually a major components of science education. Typically, a science paper explains what the researchers did, why they did it, and what they found, and what they think it all means. And this provides information on the context of critical thinking and synthesis. Now, critical thinking involves theory, data, and logic to produce a cogent opinion of a scientific undertaking. And synthesis involves putting concepts and findings together. Scientific papers which are written for scientists are always formal. Their style is very formal. They are filled with jargon and technical knowledge. They are heavy on data. And there is a rigid format in most of the journals which accept such papers. As you know, it will be title, author, abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion, acknowledgements, literature cited, and illustrations, tables, etc. Almost all science journals will have these titles with minor variations in the way you express. For example, literature cited, different people have different formats and so on. Now, good writing in science is similar to good writing in other areas of other fields. And the rules of, good grammar, spelling, punctuation, and style always apply here as well. A well-written paper has better chance of successful review through peer review system and acceptance by the editors for publication. Now, it requires a lot of time and effort to fix a badly written article, and this usually goes far beyond what is normally required of a handling editor or reviewer in a journal. And therefore, precise, unambiguous language, clear expression, and logical organization are very crucial for its acceptance. All the experts are unanimous in saying that one must use simple language, write to convey understanding and not to impress. Earlier papers, if you had noticed, they adopted a passive voice to communicate system. Most journals today, or at least many journals today, prefer active voice. It connects directly with the audience, and therefore it is better. You have a better chance at communicating what point you want to put across to people. Also, one must eliminate irrelevant information, no matter how interesting you think it is or how hard you work to gather it, because it is a distraction from the main point that you're trying to make in your paper. How you organize your material is very crucial. One must develop ideas as a series of strong, logical paragraphs and so on. There are lots of material available, as previous speakers also mentioned, out there in literature, on the web, and several books and papers are written. And I have tried to communicate some 6 simple mantras, as some people call them. I have taken this from a recent paper by Sawyer in functional ecology, for example. Now, this 6 letters, you can remember them by the term success. Simple, keep it simple by finding the main message. And actually, use the second thing you must do is unexpected. Use the unexpected to grab the reader's attention. It may be a knowledge gap. It may be an unforeseen consequences, an unusual feedback or something. Concrete. Make the central concept easily grasped and remembered. Credible. Support your interpretation and discussion with evidence. Emotional. Stimulate interest and highlight the relevance of what you have done to make people care about the research. And lastly, the story. People enjoy and remember stories. So a good manuscript, narratives about your research with a logical train of thought. So, these are just general concepts, and one can only be, able to tell you some general guidelines, because everybody has to find the best mix that suits them. Now, coming to popular articles. Now, popular articles, unlike the regular journal articles, are meant to actually bridge the gap between science and society. In fact, there is a lot of gap in science communication, as everybody has been saying before this today. In spite of all the good things that are there, there is so much of fake science floating around. There is one gets to know about a lot of miracle cures, which will cure dreadful diseases on the WhatsApp and so on. And unless one actually communicates well with society or members of the society in a language that they understand, science communication will not be very successful. And therefore, it is important for scientists themselves or professional journalists to actually communicate science findings well. So, unlike the journal articles, these popular articles can be published in newspapers or popular magazines. And the aim is to inform and engage non-specialist audience with no exceptional passion for the discipline on new scientific insights and discoveries. It is also intended for persons who have several other competing options. For example, they may be in that same time, they could choose to watch a television program, or they could go to the next article, or they may have some other things to do. And therefore, the article in a popular domain has to grip the attention and maintain that attention till the end. Otherwise, there is every chance that one's article will be passed over. So unlike in formal journal writings, one has to actually employ here a very informal style, using active voice and with few technical words, with a catchy title and a nice ending. If you don't communicate immediately at the very beginning, the most interesting and important part in your article, you are likely to lose your audience. And therefore, emphasis on meaning and impact, not so much on methods and techniques or characteristic features of popular articles, unlike those in journals, scientific journals which are meant for scientists. Now, I would also like to touch upon, because recently INSA held a competition, essay competition for people in different areas of science. And one of the things that would be useful, there are many competitions, in fact, hundreds of essays were 400 essays actually came in for being judged. And many of these essays were actually very good. The entrants, the participants had taken so much pain to put them together, and many of them are wonderfully written as well. But remember, when you're taking part in a competition, the idea is to eliminate all those which don't fit the basic rules of the competition. And unlike, there are several differences when you write such essays in competition, or essays for competitions. It will not be published or may be published depending upon the agency that is conducting the competition. But first of all, one must be very sure to follow all the rules of the competition. Otherwise, based on those rules, your essay may be eliminated even before it goes to the judges. For example, word limit. If they have set a word limit for you and you exceed that word limit by a significant margin, then of course, before you start, it will be eliminated. And therefore, all the rules that the organization has set you have to follow, because it's only fair to eliminate such things because all the entrants are informed of the rules beforehand. And the essays are reviewed by judges or reviewers, but unlike in a journal article, mistakes are not corrected here because it's just evaluated for how good it is for a prize. Therefore, in among hundreds of essays that you have to catch the attention of the judge or the viewer in a small window of time. And therefore, a catchy title, evidence of good comprehension of the scene, contents, that is facts and accuracy, are all things that will stand you in good stead. Here also, the basic rules apply: language, grammar, punctuation, fluidity, style, and the overall impact of such essays. Among many entries, as I said even before, competing for the same, your essay has to stand out. And it is best, therefore, to ask a friend or a peer to read through iterations of your essay and incorporate suggestions, criticisms, and so on, because you will not get a second chance. In the recent essay competition, which was held by INSA-SERB on the theme, Our Lives and the Sciences, during and after the pandemic, and as I said, there were more than 408 entries here. I'll just give you one example. One of the prize-winning essays had the title, Leveraging Lockdown, Experiments Outside the Lab. Now, while most of these essays use the theme itself as a title, there were many people who went on to make their own titles. And many of them are very catchy. And I just mentioned one. There are several others which were good like that. One of these prize-winning essays actually had tried to illustrate how an adversity could be converted into an opportunity. It left you feeling hopeful and optimistic and demonstrated that even during a pandemic, it is possible to see things in a positive light. And there were others like this, and many, as I said, it was difficult to arrive at these entries for the prizes. Many of you had taken extreme pains to write it, a lot of skill. So what I'm trying to say is you have to make your pitch very quickly to attract the attention of the judge, because you may have to evaluate 100 essays in a small period of time. And therefore, what will be standing out in your essay will be most likely to grab that attention. There are a couple of other things which are important also. They're not really science communication like the previous ones like this, but writing for grants, for example, grant applications is also an important thing. And there are various courses that are being offered now to do that. And I'm sure one can find out those things and get some expertise and help in that. The other thing is, those of you who join policy-making bodies, funding agencies, have to make a lot of minuting of meetings which are related to science. And if those minutes are not made properly, it has consequences, it has outcomes which may not be what was intended. And therefore, making minutes correctly also needs some kind of training. And currently, I don't think there is anybody offering such courses or anything as far as I know. But I think funding agencies must themselves take responsibility for training people in equipping their scientists to record things accurately. Currently, that does not, unfortunately, happen. So these are some general guidelines and general tips for making effective contributions to science communications. As I said, you have to find out what suits you best, what language suits you best, which audience you are addressing, and what exactly do you want to communicate, whether it is a journal paper or a popular science article or whatever it is. And I'm sure with a lot of help from peers and others, and get some professional training, one can learn this and become good communicators. Thank you very much.
A wonderful lecture, Dr. Natesh, in which you could compare the technical writing and the popular science writing. But I'm happy and sad at the same time sat for Delhi University, which lost you many years ago to DBT. And I am sure the way you have lectured, everyone must be very happy. And you are a wonderful speaker, and you have brought out the salient differences between technical and popular science writing. In addition, he has also pointed out the great significance of training for young people, particularly those who are aspiring for grants. And I think this is a point which should be taken up by the people. So thank you so much, Dr. Natesh, for this very, very insightful presentation. We have Shri Hasad Javed Khan with us. He's a seasoned science communicator who has been in this business for more than 3 decades. At the moment, he is the chief scientist at CSIR, National Institute of Science Communication and Policy Research, in short known as NISPER in Delhi. And this is a new entity created by the merger of 2 earlier organizations, NISTAX and NISCARE. At CSIR NISPER, he was Dean of the Science Communication Vertical and head of the Popular Science Division, which brings out 3 popular science magazines, Science Reporter, Vigyan Pragati, and I think the only Urdu science magazine by name, Science Ki Duniya. A lot of books and also journals are being published by that division and that institution. He has published quite a few science and technology articles. He has published news reports, editorials, book reviews, interviews, etc. in Hindi and English, and also has more than 200 broadcasts to his credit in Hindi, English, and Urdu for radio. He is very active in teaching science communication also. He has also authored 4 books, co-authored 10 books, edited 12 books, and written 2 chapters for books on science. So we are so happy to have him amongst us and let our young people learn from him what science writing is about. So Shri Hassan Javed Khan.
Thank you, Dr. Nautiyal. I would also like to thank Dr. Chandrima Shah, Dr. Ravind for inviting me here to this workshop. Unfortunately, my job has been made totally irrelevant today by the wonderful presentations by Nakul, Shubhra, and most notably Dr. Natesh. Whatever I wanted to say has been covered already. I was supposed to talk on science writing, popular science writing to be more specific. I'm not a great writer, but I will just try to give you some perspectives from the editor's point of view. I've been editing a magazine called Science Reporter for the past, I've been with the magazine for the past 30 years. I've been editing it for the past 10 years. So whatever experiences I've had with screening articles, with going through articles, with editing articles, I would like to get some insights for you, might be helpful for you all. Now, popular science writing, as other speakers have also said, it's not just about putting pen to paper, putting words together and constructing sentences. It's a process. It's an approach that matters. First quality that I would stress on for a popular science writer or a prospective author or prospective writer would be humility. Humility in science writing is very important. Humility to accept the fact that you don't know details about the topic, you don't know about the topic that you want to write on, and humility to go back to sources, collect as much information as you need to study, do extensive studies, and then start writing. Also, humility to accept feedback from readers, from your peer group, and also have the humility to revise your articles. Often we are so enamored by our own writing that the first draft that we write, we think that the job is done. But revision and editing are essential parts of writing, without which the process of writing does not get completed. So thinking about the topic, studying the topic, comprehending the topic, unless you yourself understand the topic, you won't be able to really put it across to your readers. and also targeting. Nakul talked about studying the audience. That is what targeting is all about. You can pitch an article for a scientific group. You can pitch the same article for children. You can pitch the same article for semi-technical audiences. But the approach will have to be different. The presentation will have to be totally different. So you really need to study the publication for which you are writing. You really need to get a hang of the readership that you are writing for. And only then start writing and start presenting your information. Now, as a writer, what you have to offer is information, complete information, accurate information. Scientific writing is about accurate information. Objectivity, you don't take sides. You present the facts as they are. And of course, creativity. The more creative you are, the more acceptability your writing will have. And magazines and publications and newspapers are always looking for exclusivity and originality. There are so many people writing on so many topics. What a publication looks for is exclusivity. And if the topic's not very new, maybe a different tweak, a new spin to an old topic. That is what people are looking for. And of course, originality is very important here. No plagiarism, no copying. Yeah. So the first thing that I often get asked by prospective writers and authors is what to write and from where to source the information. As an editor who hardly knows the prospective writer, it's very difficult for me to really point to a particular direction, particular writer. So I don't know their strengths, I don't know their interests, their background, but there is no limit to what you can write on science. And you can start with writing on fundamentals of science if you are an educationist. Start with explaining scientific concepts in an easy to understand language. You can talk about topical events, future trends. You have the strength of analysis with you. You can always talk about future trends, talk about breakthroughs, book reviews, interviews. So there is so much that you can talk about. Sourcing stories, again, so many avenues today, newspapers, you can pick up leads, you can pick up thoughts and ideas from research journals, magazines, press releases. Shubhra talked about going through press releases. Very important avenues of picking up stories. And then, of course, you can have to pick up stories from conferences and workshops. There are so many stories there, from websites, of course. And then if you look around, there is so much happening around you. If Neeraj Chopra wins a gold medal, there are so many stories that you can, science stories that you can make from that particular peg. In science stories, often you need a peg. When Neeraj Chopra wins a gold medal, you can talk about sporting, the science of sporting equipment, the science of sporting techniques, the science of fitness. So from one single happening, one single event, you can give different sorts of spins to the topics and write on those topics. And of course, we have already discussed this at length, the scourge of fake news and disinformation and misinformation. This is something that as a budding writer, as a prospective communicator, you should be very aware of in whichever avenue you choose to write in. This is something that should really worry you. Misinformation is something that is very rampant these days. And the irony of news flows these days is that fake news travels much faster. This has been reported in journals like Science or so. Individuals generally do not question the credibility of information unless it goes against their own preconceptions. People tend to live in their own echo chambers. So this is something that you can always combat through your writing. And as Dr. Natesh also already mentioned, broadly, 3 types of science writing: technical writing, research writing, and popular science writing. Technical report writing would have a certain structure. There are certain rigid formats for technical report writing. Similarly, for research paper, you have the IMRAD structure where you have the introduction, methods and materials, results and discussion. And there is a certain logic behind having certain structures because for the peer group scientists working in that same field, it's easy to pick out the relevant information that they want from a particular section. But popular science writing is not about a very rigid structure. You can simply overturn the structure of a research paper. In a research paper, you end with a conclusion, with the results and discussion. In popular science writing, you can begin with the conclusion. That can be the most interesting part, most important peg for your article. Popular science writing is about making your writing interesting and informative and innovative. Tell a story. Shubhra talked about storytelling. We have always loved telling stories, listening to stories. And so telling a story, creating a suspense is how you get people involved in your write-up. And then popular science writing is also, it also lends to incorporating views from experts. You can talk to experts. You can add the first-person accounts of people involved in that particular breakthrough news, in that particular experiment that you are trying to write about. But one thing that you need to realize is that whenever you write, you always write for the reader. It is only when you are maintaining your own personal diary that you write for yourself. Otherwise, whatever you write, whether it's an application, whether it's a report to your boss, or an article, or an application for funding, whatever you write for others. You never write for yourself. So your writing has to be very attractive, very concise, clear. And in today's age of information overload, people will stop reading your article in a fraction of a second if you give them a chance. So every word that you use, every sentence that you string together has to have some meaning and some attraction for the reader. So Dr. Natesh has already discussed all these, hallmark of good writing, appealing title, catchy beginning, clear purpose. You should, when I said comprehension is very important. Comprehension on your part is very important. The writer's part is very important. Unless you understand the subject, you will not be able to get the message across to the reader. And of course, you need to have a logical arrangement and comprehensive coverage. At the end of the article, the reader should be left with a feeling that all his questions have been answered. Titles are the most important. On average, 8 out of 10 people will only read the headlines, but only 2 out of 10 will read the rest. So that is a statistic which I picked out from somewhere and seems to be true. So the challenge before you is attracting the reader right in the headline. So a good title will catch attention. Weak titles almost always repel the readers. So your title should be accurate, should be self-explanatory, but it should not be too verbose. Do not use complete sentences. Do not use abbreviations or formulas, etc. Make it very creative. One example I've given here, the title in bold is a typical research paper title. Caffeine exposure induces browning features in adipose tissue in vitro and in vivo. If you want to make a popular science article out of it, the more attractive title should be, could coffee be the secret to fighting obesity? This is just one tweak that we have given. You could have your own representation of these titles. And then there are different ways and means of giving titles. You could pose a question. Threat and danger format could be there. A rhyming format could be there. Search for the Higgs boson goes on. So whatever you do, the title has to be very appealing and very attractive. Only then people will try to read your article through. After the title comes the lead. Lead is the first few sentences or the first few paragraphs where you get the most interesting argument. And this is where you tell the reader what he can expect to learn from your article and how that article is relevant to his or her daily life. So you bring the most important argument right in the beginning of the article. Again, this is the point where you do not put off the reader by giving too many examples and figures. You have to be brief, crisp, and very creative. One example of lead that I've given of lead is a similar incident which has been put together, presented by two different newspapers in two different banners. And if you look at the second lead, you will find the imagery that has been created in the minds of the readers. And this is what will attract the reader. And then comes the body, which needs to flow smoothly from the lead. Your arguments should be organized in a logical manner. The reader should not be forced to go back from the fifth paragraph to the first paragraph to understand what's happening, what you're talking about. So the logical arrangement is very necessary. And do not give too much technical information. Wherever you need to incorporate some technical information, either illustrate it, convert it to a table, or give it in boxes, or maybe try to explain it through a photograph. Overload of information is not desired, but questions that may arise in the minds of the readers should be answered as much as possible. And then in popular science writing, unlike a research paper where you end with the results and discussion, popular science writing closes with a kicker, a punchline, so that the reader is left with an impression. And this kicker or punchline could be a learning or message from that particular the article that you have written. Or it could be a call for the reader on what he can expect in the times to come in that particular topic, the issues that remain to be answered. So you need to have a very impressive, very creative, very thoughtful ending to the popular science article. Basically, keep it short and simple, the KISS formula for popular science writing. Writing is not about impressing the reader with your vocabulary. It's about communicating. The better you communicate, the more well-known would you be as a writer, and the more people would want to read you. This is one example I love giving. It's an anecdote I picked up from somewhere, which is a hypothetical communication between a plumber and a scientist. The plumber feels that he has discovered a new way of cleaning up clogged drains by using hydrochloric acid. And so he writes to a scientist saying that he has discovered this method of cleaning clogged drains. The scientist writes back saying the efficacy of hydrochloric acid is indisputable, but the chlorine residue is incompatible with metallic permanence. And I'm sure most of us will not be able to understand what the scientist is trying to say here. And the plumber has no idea what's meant by what the scientist means by this convoluted sentence. He thinks probably it's an appreciation. He writes back saying, "Thank you." Once again, the scientist writes a very convoluted, jargon-laden statement saying we cannot assume responsibility and so on and so forth. Once again, the plumber has no idea what is being said. So he again writes back saying, thank you. By this time, the senior scientist is disgusted, and he hands the problem over to his junior scientist, who writes one simple sentence: "Do not use hydrochloric acid, it will damage the pipes." So this is the message that senior scientist has been trying to convey all along through his absolutely technical and jargon-laden language. So simplicity in communication is very important. No one will ever complain if you simplify your writing. Now some writing pitfalls, some tips on how to. As I said, writing cannot be learned in one lecture or even in 1 month or even in a lifetime. I'm still learning how to write, how to understand, how to comprehend the what would appeal before a particular audience. So writing is something that is a skill that you can master only by writing more. But some tips that you can give. First one is use short, clear, and concise sentences. Avoid long sentences. Generally, in popular science writing, long sentences and long paragraphs will signify a very technical writer. Generally, this is something that is followed in research papers. So the visual appeal has also to be there. The popular science writer needs to be visually appealing, which you can make it appear visual by using short and clear sentences. And then avoid complexity. 2 examples I've given. It must show low mammalian toxicity and phytotoxicity. It can be simply represented as it must be harmless to animals and plants. So these are things when you go back and revise your article, you will find many sentences, many statements that are coming out straight out of your training as a scientist or as a researcher. So you need to break down those statements into something that a non-specialist will be able to understand. So avoid overuse of jargon, technical terminologies should be minimized. For example, aorta can be mentioned as the main tube carrying blood out of the heart. And when you need to use a particular jargon, you can explain that in your statement itself. I've given one example. Specificity, science writing is also about being more specific. For example, the statement, the conference on cancer was well attended, scientifically has no meaning. So if you write it as 200 scientists attended the conference to deliberate on new treatment methodologies of cancer, a more clear message is being conveyed about that particular event. And then there are certain devices which you can use while writing popular science articles. Analogies which relate to everyday experience. Heart is like a pump, or kidney is like a filter. So you create an imagery in the mind of the reader so that he can understand what you're trying to say. Metaphors, the sun today is a furnace. And so things like that can be used. Then avoid ambiguity. These are language-related tips. Some examples I've given: panda meeting fails, veterinarian takes over. So at first glance, you may not realize what's amiss, but when you read it again, you'll find the meaning is totally different from what you are trying to read. 2 Soviet ships collide, 1 dies. So clarity in language is very important. If the baby does not thrive on raw milk, boil it. So these are things which will come to you once you revise your article. And then Dr. Natesh talked about active verbs. The active voice is what is used these days to convey the meaning straightforwardly and in less by using less number of words. One example: the experiment was conducted so that the relationship between the 2 theories could be examined. You can simply put it as the experiment examined the relationship between 2 theories. So the length of the sentence is reduced and it's more straightforward. Omit needless words. Often we use high-sounding phrases. For example, in view of the fact that since is a small word that can convey the same meaning, with the possible exception of except. So needless words are a burden on the reader's memory. So we need to try and limit these words. Use short substitutes. Infrequent is rare. Proximal means close. Okay, there's something called tautology, where you simply use two words without any meaning. Positive benefits. Benefits are generally positive. Past history. History is always past. So again, these are things you come across when you revise your article. So revising your article is most important part of your popular science writing. As I said, you should have the humility to accept the fact that you don't know everything, that you need to learn more, that you need to study more, you need to collect more information, and you need to revise your article again and again. Probably you also need to show your articles to your peer group to read it aloud for you and to give you feedback. So don't fall in love with your own writing and be brutal when you revise your own article. Sometimes we put in a 2,000-word article, which could be easily, information could have been easily conveyed in 1,000 words. But since you have already fallen in love with your own writing, you don't feel like cutting out anything extra. But for the sake of conveying and appealing information in a short time for the reader, for the benefit of the reader, you must be very brutal with your own writing. So some of the things that you need to check while revising your article, whether your article is informative enough, questions that would arise in the minds of the readers, whether those questions have been answered. Is your title creative enough and your lead creative enough to attract attention of the reader while he's flipping through a magazine? Again, logical flow of information has to be there. Sufficient and accurate information has to be there. Whether have you, not every popular science writing may be amenable to using analogies and metaphors or real life human interest examples, but try to use them as much as you possibly can. Avoid long sentences, whether you have avoided jargons, have you used active voice, and of course, correctness of spellings is very much desired these days. You have spell checkers in your PCs and laptops. This is something that is a great put off for editors when they find glaring spelling mistakes in articles. And then, of course, last but not the least, the ending should be impactful, interesting, should carry some message. So that was all. Thanks. Would be open to questions.
Thank you, Javed Saha, for this very beautiful and very clear presentation that tells you how to go about if you decide to write a popular science article. Because of shortage of time, perhaps we'll take up the questions at the end for all the three experts. And the central message he gave was that simplicity, brevity, and clarity are the keys to good writing. For example, if you say H2O is available 50 meters away and water is available 5 kilometers away, then it's obvious that a common man will crawl for 5 kilometers before he can get water. So when we are communicating with the common people, the language that we use, the style that we use, avoiding of jargon, they all become very important. And another thing he said was that rewriting is very important. It seems that Ernest Hemingway wrote the last page of his famous book, A Farewell to Arms, 39 times before he was satisfied. So I think when as a aspiring writer, we should not hesitate in revising again and again. The next speaker in this session and the last speaker for this session is Shri Pallav Badla, a very popular communicator of science through writing as well as videos. He is very well known for many of his programs. He's a renowned Indian science communicator who is respected for his very good understanding of the science and technology system of this country. He enjoys explaining the difficult and the complex ideas of science in very simple language. And the missions to Mars and Moon were very important missions for the country. And those who have watched those programs on television would remember him, how beautifully he explained the intricacies of the subject. For American Weekly Science, his stories have highlighted India to the world, and many people in the Western countries know India through some of his writings. He also anchored a weekly program, Life in Science with Pallab Bagla, on the India Science Channel. He has been a regular with the Vigyan programs too, and he has been suitably recognized all over the country, in fact, across the world for his contributions. He won 3 national awards for science writing, including from INSA and NCST-CTST. In the year 2010, he was awarded the very prestigious David Perlman Award for the Excellence in Science Journalism by the American Geophysical Union, USA. He's photographer for the top photo agency in Getty Images, whose name you keep on seeing on the internet. The YouTube channel New Frontiers in Science and Development is his doing. Visiting professor at National Institute of Advanced Studies, popularly known as NIAS at Bangalore. He has authored several books, including the co-authored Bridging the Communication Gap in Science and Technology, Lessons from India, which was published by Springer in the year 2017. So I think I can go on and on. I can just tell 2 of his achievements. He was president of the International Science, he has been president of the International Science Writers Association, and was also a member of the executive board of the World Federation of Science Journalists. So welcome, Bagla Sahab, and we are eager to listen to you.
Thanks a lot, and so nice of INSA and SARB to have a meeting which is more than just online, and there is a face-to-face interaction. To be able to meet stalwarts like Dr. Nitesh, Javed, Dr. Chandrima is online, Dr. Nautiyal, Arvind, and we've had some excellent presentations in the morning. And trust me, this is exactly what my job was in the last 10, 15 years when I was a television journalist. Almost everything that had to be said has been said. So when at 9 o'clock bulletin, I needed to grab the attention of my audience in less than 90 seconds or 2 minutes, that was the job. मैं अंग्रेजी में भी बोलूंगा और हिंदी में भी बोलूंगा. हिंदी मुझे बहुत पसंद है. हिंदी की ऑडियंस बहुत बड़ी है. वर्नाक्युलर लैंग्वेजेस, रीजनल लैंग्वेजेस की बात आई थी. कोलेगल शर्मा का नाम आया था. वो कन्नड़ा का बहुत बड़ा नाम है. मुझे कम्युनिकेट करने में अक्सर भाषा बीच में नहीं आनी चाहिए. भले ही अंग्रेजी हो, कन्नड़ा हो, बंगाली हो, इंग्लिश हो, कोई सी भी हो. और जैसे नौटियाल साहब ने बताया, मेरा एक और पैशन है, वो है फोटोग्राफी. और वहां पे कोई भाषा बीच में नहीं आती. I can cut across all language barriers, from South America to Japan. In between, everywhere, every country, pictures taken by me have been used in hordes. So there is a language which cuts across the language barrier. Now let me also turn the whole discussion which has happened on its head. While most have emphasized that science writing is important, I certainly say science writing is important. It's a skill which is important to have. हर किसी को आनी चाहिए कम्युनिकेशन. आपको अपना पावर पॉइंट बनाना है या ग्रांट लेना है, जैसे नटेश साहब ने कहा, या जैसे जावेद भाई ने बताया कि अगर आपको मैगजीन में या न्यूज़पेपर में आर्टिकल करना है तो आपको कम्युनिकेशन आना है. अगर आपको अपने पिताजी से ग्रांट चाहिए अमेरिका जाने के लिए क्योंकि आपकी फेलोशिप आ गई है और आपके पास ट्रैवल ग्रांट नहीं है, तो फिर भी आपको अपने फादर को कन्विंस करने के लिए कम्युनिकेट करना पड़ेगा. तो कम्युनिकेशन इज अ वेरी बेसिक एंड अ वेरी फंडामेंटल आर्ट. नाउ लेट मी से व्हाई आई एम टर्निंग द आर्गुमेंट टुडे on its head. See, 21st century, we are living in I shouldn't say post-COVID time, but still COVID times. a lot has changed. And in the 21st century, in my humble opinion, one of the most powerful ways of communicating is through short videos, memes, graphics, animation. Writing would be at the base of all of this, but the format in which the public is consuming information has changed dramatically thanks to the ubiquitous presence of smartphones and internet. I should also add, and to dispel some of the notions which were created by some of the earlier speakers, we are living in COVID times, and these are, if you ask me, golden times for communication. COVID has really shown how we needed to communicate, and I'm going to talk specifically about India. And trust me, whatever I say with a lot of strength and command behind what I'm saying. All through COVID, if you see, the country has done remarkably well in communication, be it communicating the lockdown, be it finding solutions for diagnostics, PPE kits, N95 masks, and finally, vaccines. किसी ने कहीं पे भी ये नहीं सोचा था कि हिंदुस्तान 100 करोड़ या 200 करोड़ वैक्सीन डोज साल के अंदर या 18 महीने के अंदर अपनी पॉपुलेशन को दे पाएगा। और मैं क्यों कह रहा हूं कि हमारे यहां का कम्युनिकेशन बहुत स्ट्रांग रहा है, आप देखिए, the hesitancy which we have seen for adoption of vaccines by the 1.3-1.4 billion population of India has been very, very, very small. A communication right from Prime Minister Narendra Modi down to our key communicators in health, Dr. Vinod Paul, Randeep Guleria, Balram Bhargav, Rajesh Bhushan, Love Agarwal. The communication has been very pointed, sharp, and continuous. And that is what has helped in the country not having the kind of hesitancy which we have seen. हमारी बड़ी इच्छा होती है कि हम हरदम अमेरिका से कंपेयर करते हैं हर चीज को। या अमेरिका में जो है वो तो बस सब सही है, या यूरोप में है या ब्रिटेन में है वो सब सही है। थोड़ा सा पीछे जाइए और देखिए, एक हमारे लीडर हैं और एक अमेरिका के लीडर थे, अब तो नहीं रहे प्रेसिडेंट, लेकिन प्रेसिडेंट डोनाल्ड ट्रंप, कितनी उन्होंने फेक न्यूज और कितनी उन्होंने गलत इंफॉर्मेशन व्हाइट हाउस के पोडियम से फैलाई, उसका कोई अंदाजा करता है? हम फेक न्यूज की हिंदुस्तान में बात करते हैं, वो फेक न्यूज तो अपने ही पोडियम से फैला रहे थे। यहां तक उन्होंने एक बार कह दिया कि अगर आप फिनाइल का एक क्लोन लगा लीजिए तो शायद आपको कोविड-19 नहीं होगा। ये प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ अमेरिका बात कर रहे थे। देखिए, समझिए कि हिंदुस्तान में बहुत चीजें अच्छी हैं और कोविड के दौरान हमारे वैज्ञानिकों ने, और मैं इसको बड़े डंके की चोट से कहना चाहता हूं कि अगर हिंदुस्तान ने कोविड-19 पैंडेमिक को संभाला है और देश संभला है, it is thanks to the efforts of Indian scientists, Indian technologists, Indian physicians. And a lot of the communication was happening from these quarters to people in the lay audience. Well, some of the credit should also go to colleagues like Hassan Javed Khan, Shubhra. Obviously, Nakul did a remarkable job all through the pandemic at Vigyan Prasad. A lot of credit should go to them also. But the clear and concise messaging which was emerging certainly helped India fight the pandemic. And I will say again with certain strength behind me, remarkably well compared to many other countries. That does not mean that we didn't go wrong. Go back to the very awful second phase of the second wave of the pandemic, when there was a shortage of oxygen. That was a bad phase, but that does not mean we did not come out of it. We did come out of it. Now, to emphasize the point that we need to be communicating more and more is even more important today as we celebrate the 75th year of India's independence. Remember, we started off in 1947. There was widespread starvation, shortage of food. Who gave the solution? It was Indian scientists and Indian technologists, Indian agriculture scientists. They gave the Green Revolution, and today we have food surplus. We are exporting food grains. From ship to mouth to food surplus situation, all thanks to the effort of our unsung and many times despised Indian scientists. Through COVID, we found solutions thanks to the fraternity at the Indian National Science Academy. The wide gray matter which exists in this building and which comes and goes through this building needs to be acknowledged. And let me point out here again, I have said this on another occasion. I think this year, in the 75th year of India's independence, the Ratnas of Bharat and the Bharat Ratna should ideally be going to Indian scientists and Indian physicians for having saved India through the COVID-19 pandemic. All through the pandemic, I worked in the field day and night, literally. From having stood next to 6,500 corona positive samples inside a lab in Faridabad, to reporting how India first made the world's only, at that time, the world's first mobile testing lab, to going all the way across to the making of the Atal Tunnel. Communication is the key. Today, policymakers want their work to be communicated effectively across India. And social media offers a very powerful tool for doing that. Let me try and show you one particular video. This is a video I made on the mobile testing lab, which was made by the Department of Biotechnology. And it was the world's first fully equipped RT-PCR testing lab, which was going to rural areas. This was done at the peak of the lockdown. And to be able to convince a large team of camera persons to go into COVID positive areas, trust me, is not easy. Even for me to go into those areas is hard, but then I follow one dictum. If the scientist, the physician, and the technician can go somewhere, then I can also follow the same principles of safety and security and report to India how Indian scientists have been working hard. Let me attempt showing this video. This is one video where I'm very proud of. We got the Red Ink Award from the Mumbai Press Club for this particular feature, which was done at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Can we, Arvind, attempt to show this?
Science and technology touches everybody's lives. On Life of Science with Palav Bagla, we speak to one of India's best-known virologists. I promise to take you to places which are very hard to go to. Now we will don a PPE kit and go into an area. This is what a PPE kit looks like. This is Pallav Bagla wearing a full PPE kit to go into an area where they handle viruses. And Dr. Guru Prasad will show us how they do actual COVID testing. Sir, please show us.
Yes, so when the samples are collected outside, the samples are brought inside in this room. So this is where the sample alley coating happens. So you have VTM tubes which come here. And as you can see, we have 20 samples here lined up. And this is a biosafety cabinet, which is fitted with HEPA filter and is in compliance with all biosafety regulations of Government of India.
So this is where your live virus comes.
Yes.
And then what do you do here?
So the live virus comes here because we get 2-3 ml volumes. It has to be now transferred to a smaller volume so that we can handle it in our laboratory. From here, then he will add a buffer which inactivates the virus. So the first step is inactivating the virus.
Sure. So once this is done, there is no live virus, then you go on and do the actual RT-PCR and the other test you do is the rapid antigen test.
Yes. As soon as the sample is inactivated, it is brought here in smaller volumes. And this is the microcentrifuge where the samples are centrifuged following multiple steps of the protocol to isolate RNA. So Imran and Dinesh together do this every day for hundreds of samples. And we line it up here. When the RNA is ready, we set up our RT-PCR in this 96 well plates. There are multiple manufacturers, as you know, mostly from India now. So we use one of the RT-PCR kits that is supplied by the government. And we set up our RT-PCR reaction.
Then what happens inside? This is the RT-PCR machine. What happens? How do you load it?
So this is the RT-PCR machine, and once we set up the reaction, so here the RNA amplification takes place, and it takes about 1 hour 40 minutes for each run. So you can process up to 45-50 samples. When we start at around 9 o'clock, by 11:30 we start our RT-PCR. So we get our results by close to 2:30, 3 o'clock.
Okay.
So,
Assuming that this run has been done,
yes,
the run has been completed,
yes,
how do we know whether a person is negative, positive? How do the results show?
So this is how you see the results. So now this sample, this experiment had about 42 samples here.
Okay.
So you can see here, whichever samples are positive will give us a clear amplification plot. So we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, close to 12, 13 people here, samples which are positive for RT-PCR.
In this truly Atmanirbhar Bharat story, a deep dive into India's fight against the coronavirus.
I hope you liked the video. I enjoyed doing this. Now let me add a small little backstory to this. To be able to do this in June, July of India, when it's very hot, it also showed me how difficult it is for the physicians and scientists to work in PPE kits. Just a single day use of a PPE kit made me lose 2.5 liters of water. When I came out after doing the story, my shoes were thoroughly drenched. It almost seemed as if I was leaving a trail behind me when I was walking. Imagine that was 1 day or 2 days for me, but for physicians to be able to do it day in, day out for months together. That is why I say I salute our scientists and I salute our physicians and I salute the policymakers who have taken us through this very difficult phase of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's not just COVID which has kept me going. There have been other stories. All through COVID, I made 75 documentaries, half-hour documentaries going across the country. There's one more documentary which I thoroughly enjoyed doing, which is the making of the Atal Tunnel. The Atal Tunnel is a strategic tunnel for India. So one of the jobs of a science communicator and a science writer is not just to tell our audience the strength of our scientific community, but also to send a message across to our adversaries, across the western border to the adversary there, and to across the eastern border to the adversary on the east, that India knows how to protect its borders. One very big achievement by the country was the making of the Atal Tunnel. The Atal Tunnel is today, at its altitude, the longest tube tunnel made in the Himalayas. It connects the Kullu-Manali Valley to the Lahaul-Spiti Valley, and then connecting on all the way to Leh-Ladakh, and connects all the way to Siachen. So you can imagine the strategic importance of that particular tunnel. This story needed to be told. There were lots which has happened. Leh stories had appeared, but we needed to tell the science story behind it. So we flew all the way to the Atal Tunnel and did this feature. It's a short feature. Let me try and attempt playing that.
It's cold, it's snowed under, the temperature is hovering between -15 and -20 degrees centigrade. I am in the scenic valley of Lahaul and Spiti. I wouldn't have been standing here had it not been for the Atal Tunnel, which you see in the background, the green structure which opens into the लाहौल वैली
3000 मीटर की ऊंचाई पर बनी और 9 किलोमीटर से भी अधिक लंबी यह टनल न केवल सबसे लंबी बल्कि एक बेहद कॉम्प्लेक्स कंस्ट्रक्शन है। इसके निर्माण की राह कोई आसान नहीं थी, पर इन सभी मुश्किलों को पार करते हुए अटल टनल को पूरा कर हमारे बॉर्डर रोड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के जवानों ने अपनी दृढ़ता और संकल्प को दर्शाया है।
On this episode of Life in Science with Pallav Bagla, an inside look at the making of the Atal Tunnel, a look at civil engineering aspects, a look at electrical engineering, and how engineers from the Border Roads Organization braved the cold conditions and finally connected with an all-weather road between Lahaul and Spiti and the Kullu Valley.
For your information, the second tunnel in the world, about 10,000 feet, is only 2.72 kilometers in USA, Eisenhower Tunnel. You can understand the jump what India has taken over the technology over 10,000 feet in tunnels.
The tunnel also sends a message to India's adversaries. India knows how to protect its borders. Keep watching India Science.
So this was one feature I thoroughly enjoyed. Just to give you a little more background, I had walked across the Rohtang Pass through which the Atal Tunnel is made back in 1983. So I knew the tough conditions under which the Border Roads Organization worked to make the tunnel. And Javed is party to some of our early work which we did together in a series called India Can Do It, where we also looked at how the Border Road Organization was helping connect India and join the hearts. The key message I want to leave you with: we are living near a time when the COVID is almost coming to an end, possibly if a new strain does not arise. We've seen a lot of difficult times but we've also seen some very effective communication. So during COVID and now, it has been a certain golden era of communication of science for India. Leave aside some of the fake news and the WhatsApp university forwards. Outliers need to be thrown out of the window. So let's leave that out. But by and large, we've done remarkably well in communicating the risk and the benefits of whatever we needed to be done through the pandemic. And in times to come, I personally feel, as we approach what is Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls the Amrit Kal, the new India would certainly be made based on foundations of science and technology. And foundations of science and technology which have a firm base in India. In COVID-19, we came out well because our scientists were given the free hand and the resources to deliver what they needed to do. In this Amrit Kal, when science and technology will play a role in the making of a new India, science and technology will be critical, so will be science communication. There will be plenty of pitfalls, there will be plenty of fake news, and trust me, there will be plenty of these so-called developed countries who will try to again and again trip India. Like they tried to trip when India was making its own covaxin. The kind of false stories which emerged from various parts of the Western world regarding the covaxin is an amazing story. So as we go to the Amrit Kal, the role of the science writer, the role of the science communicator would be even more important. Important to convey facts, important to empower our own democracy. We are the largest democracy of the world. We will remain the largest democracy of the world. And the strong place in the Committee of Nations for India is certainly assured if we continue telling our own people the strengths which we have and tell people strengths truthfully, honestly, and take them to the people to make their judgments. If we can deliver 2 billion doses of the COVID-19 vaccine for a vast country like India, we can certainly become one of the most powerful nations of the world in not 25, but less than 25 years. And science communicators and science writers will have a role in that. Whether it is recognized or not recognized is indifferent. We need to do our job. Like Javed said, with humility, we will continue to do that. And all of you who are watching this particular show, all of you who are participating in this workshop, important workshop by the Indian National Science Academy, our flag bearer for science, please don't be crestfallen. ये टाइम हिंदुस्तान का है, ये टाइम हमारा है और हम आगे अच्छे तरीके से बढ़ेंगे. इसी के साथ I will stop and take any questions. I'm a journalist. I spend my time asking questions, but I'm very happy to answer whatever questions are there from the audience. But please be rest assured, this is India's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bagla Sahab, for this wonderful, I would say, story which captivated everybody, and we all listened to you very, very attentively. We know that we are a little bit fast behind the schedule, but still we have time to take a few questions for Dr. Natesh, Shri Javed Sahab, and Palla Bagla Sahab. And so I can try to read out from the chat box. There is a comment, listening to your talk in Hindi is like having a personal conversation with you. You rightly said, in science communication, it's also important to explain or share your things through pictorial presentation. There is another comment, thank you every speaker for this informative workshop, thanks so much. This was by Mr. Abhishek. And then Mr. Venkatesh has again thanked. Dr. Pal has said, is the mother of invention, its father's creativity. India has successfully proved its Atmanirbharta in the pandemic. Then a commendable work, comment by Dr. Akanksha Vani. Then a comment said, you are an inspiration to each one of us. Glad to you and a big salute to you. Then there is a kind of thank you, sir, for such a great session. Then again, Chavi has commented that really inspirational story, salute to the spirit, and nice, sir, and so on. I'm looking for some question. Looks like our experts have really said
you can ask questions yourself. Nautiyal, you are the moderator, you can ask questions.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to pose a question to all the three panelists. And it would be, we have organizations like NISPER, we have organizations like Vigyan Prasad, we also have NCSTC, which is a division of Department of Science and Technology. Do you think these organizations, either together or in their own capacities, what kind of new things will they have on their charter in the coming decade? We have seen their great role, which Palla Sahab also highlighted during this 2-3 years of COVID curse. I can tell you one more very interesting story, that there is an institute by name Birbal Sahani Institute of Paleosciences in Lucknow. They had a DNA laboratory, but during this period, that's work on research that stopped. Instead, that was into a testing facility for COVID. And I think this was a great decision, and the highest number of samples were tested by them. So there must be many such other stories that could be covered. But in the coming few years, as far as the science communication agencies are concerned, as I mentioned, NCSTC, NISPER, or Vigyan Prasad, what role or enhanced role do you see for them in the coming few years? Each one by Dr. Natesh, would you like to take this?
Well, by and large, until the COVID, communication about science was not very great in this country. And it was, the COVID helped this, as Palla repeatedly mentioned this. It was very opportune time for, during the COVID, for this science communication to blossom. And there were many more opportunities and many more stories, inspirational experiences that happened and had to be brought into public domain. I think now that we have arrived at that position, it is important to sustain. And not only these three organizations, I think every organization, every government agency, research institutions, even universities who do good research, they all ought to have good science communicating units. I think the science and technology innovation policy hopes that this will happen. But mere wishful thinking will not convert that into reality. I think we must put in enough funds, ensure enough funding, enough people, enough experience, enough training programs for all this. And I think with a concerted effort, as Pallav has been saying this again, if there is a will, we can do that. And I think this is the right time. COVID has given us the correct amount of momentum and the importance of putting across science-related issues before the public. Now, climate change, for example, or gene editing, these are issues like this, including, of course, health issues. And so
this was a great learning experience for us.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody is entitled to and, in fact, should participate in this. I think it should happen.
Well, you pointed out three organizations, and I must add that some of my very detailed work during COVID was thanks to the active support of Vigyan Prasad. Arvind is sitting right here. He is now moved a step higher and looking at stuff from a different perch. But I don't think the kind of detail and the kind of freedom I had to do the documentaries which I did, 75 of them, of which 8 of them are from Kashmir. Very few people at that point even wanted to go to Kashmir because of all the troubles and COVID and everything. We still went there and did 8 documentaries from Kashmir on science in the Kashmir Himalayas. There is a certain effort, and I must point out the president of the Indian National Science Academy, Dr. Chandrima, is there. We need to make sure that these institutions are strengthened. We have one Javed Khan, years and years and decades of editing the Science Reporter magazine, almost single-handedly. I used to be his junior at one point in the magazine, or we should say colleagues, and we had lots of fun together. But subsequently, Javed has been left almost alone, but he is managing. But there is Dr. Chandrima, and I think as the president of the Indian National Science Academy, you need to put your strength and force behind to make sure that institutions like Vigyan Prasad are continued support. There is an effort to kind of dilute their work or to even close them down. But I think India would be poorer if that happens. And I must add here, the leadership of Dr. Nakul Parashar as director of Vigyan Prasar has certainly been very helpful in trying to get the science message across India, across different genres, because he not only did India Science Channel, but India Science Wire, but also languages, folk theatre, medium, so many things. If there is an effort to dilute this, I think it would be at the peril of India not becoming faster a new India, which I want and I dream of. So strengthening organizations like Science Reporter, strengthening organizations like Vigyan Prasad, strengthening organizations like NCSTC, and I must add, I am a double beneficiary of NCSTC, having won an award twice, the national award, and also a beneficiary from the Indian National Science Academy for having won the Indira Gandhi Award, for which Dr. Nautiyal had mentioned. See, India has been very kind to science communicators who have done their job honestly. If you do your job well, there is lots of resources available to do your work, and in times to come, that will also be available. But institutions need to be strengthened further. We should not let them die down. And I think with Dr. Chandrima and with the incumbent president, Dr. Ashutosh Sharma, INSA should put its might behind making sure that the organizations which are taking the work which scientists at INSA are doing to the public does not end as with the COVID-19 pandemic. This is just the beginning. Dr. Natesh also said, this is the point where it can really lift off or take off. So continue strengthening them is what my strong message would be. My work would not have happened through COVID-19 had it not been for the strong support from Dr. Nakul Parashar's team and the production team at IMAC, which is Arjun Bhagat and his team, because we had immense travel, immense resources to go and do deep stories.
But there is a related question which somebody has asked there, which Javed Sahab should be able to answer. He said, I wanted to know, it's Mr. Praveen Kumar, if there were a difference between the citing references in the articles intended to be published in scientific journals and popular science magazines. can we use hyperlinks intended to be published in Science?
We generally don't give references in the manner that you see in journals. That's at the end of the paper. But we incorporate the references within the text. For instance, so-and-so said this message in a particular journal. So we incorporate that in the text. We don't follow the style of the journal. Generally, where all the references are cited at the end. And links, we don't read e-version of the magazine. We upload the PDF of the magazine on the web, but we don't have an e-version. So we give the hyperlinks within brackets in the text of the magazine. But once we are planning to have some e-versions, but let's see how it goes.
While Dr. Mandal checks more questions in the chat box, there is a question from Dr. Arvind Ranade, and that's a very interesting question. We all have been exhorting the scientists to write for popular magazines and newspapers and so on. His question is, why science communication and popularization in R&D institutions is always considered inferior or easy or a thankless job? So someone would like to take this question.
Natesh Sava, he was the policy maker here.
What is this question again?
The question is, why science communication and popularization in R&D institutions is always considered inferior or easy or worse, thankless?
Scientists are not good communicators. And there is no system in any of our research institutions in the past to nurture and engage people to do science communications. There are institutions, for example, NCBs, similar organizations, used to have professionals who were trained to take a look at your grant applications, to encourage you to write something and release it. But most of our institutions do not have such facilities at all. And this is what I mentioned when I spoke, that even simple things like taking minutes of a meeting need training. And most of the scientists who join funding agencies or policy-making bodies are left to their own devices and not have professional help for them coming through this. And I think that is a very neglected area in most of our institutions. And that I think is at the heart of this. Now, as I say again, this is a good time to remedy that. And I think money should not be an issue anyway. And all such institutions should, it's high time they looked at hiring somebody who would do that job properly, and in general train scientists within their domains. Be better communicators. Help is available now.
While we look at the chat box for further questions, Dr. Mandal, Palla Baglaji has to say something.
Well, let me say, science communication or science writing or science advocacy or taking science to the people or outreach or public understanding of science, trust me, is not rocket science. It's very simple. अगर आप अपने काम को अच्छे से समझते हैं तो आप अच्छे से समझा सकते हैं. बस इतनी सी खेल है और कोई लंबा चौड़ा उसमें खेल नहीं है. और जावेद ने आपको इतना लंबा चौड़ा पावर पॉइंट बताया, ये करो, वो मत करो, ये मत करो, वो मत करो. अरे जो बात आप अपने घर में अपने बच्चों को समझा सकते हो जो आपने काम किया, या अपनी दादी को समझा सकते हैं कि आपने क्या काम किया, I think that is the key to communication. As far as the point about the need for having more scientists who are trained, I have long argued, and Dr. Saha is still there. I think there is a need for having training of our senior and middle level scientists on communication. Let me give you an instance. I did 13 years of television as science editor for New Delhi Television. And trust me, there have been many secretaries, many chairmen of the Indian Space Research Organization, heads of the Atomic Energy Agency, who have given their first interviews on television to me. Most times, before I used to start a television interview with these senior scientists, I would sit down and give them a few tips on what to do and what not to do. Because most of them had no clue on what to do during a television interview. These are days when there were television debates. We had one very senior scientist who was participating in a debate on nuclear. It was an hour-long debate, a discussion actually, not a debate. And in between, the gentleman slept because there was a long gap between two panelists to speak. So you have to be very alert and need training. Scientists need training on how to do outreach. It doesn't come naturally, but it's not hard to do at all. Training how to do a press conference, how to write a press release, how to have photographs, how to have videos, how to have memes, animation, graphs, all of them are critical. Especially when people are chosen as directors and secretaries, they need to be trained in that genre. And that is woefully lacking. And I think INSA can take a lead with Nautiyal Saab there and Arvind now at the helm of INSA. It can be taken up as a priority activity of training our middle level scientists as they grow up into the fold, how they can do better communication. So it's an important need and a gap.
Thank you so much, Bagla Sahab, for these wonderful suggestions. Would Professor Chandrima Shah like to comment?
Yes, I would certainly like to comment. I'm thankful to all the speakers who brought out so many essential points today. And the last one that Dr. Bagla pointed out, that the communication of science by the scientists, we lack that really and truly. But we need some training in there. But I have also seen one phenomenon while talking to scientists is, data is like their baby. So till they are very protective about it. So till they actually publish it in a very good journal, they do not want to give an inkling of what they're doing. This has happened, this I have seen before. So that is one problem we have. But I think we must engage the scientists, mid-career scientists and senior scientists as well. I mean, as he said, the directors also should be trained how to speak to the public. So that is very important. And in the pandemic, we have come across, people speaking on television, and, we are listening. I mean, general lay public is listening with so much interest. So there is interest in it. So it's very important to do that. I just float one question to the panel. What do you think of citizen science? Which means that involving the citizens in scientific affairs. Citizen science is a very in thing now. I don't know how it will work in our country. Maybe one of you can, maybe Javed Saab can, maybe Dr. Natesh can. That should we have citizen science going? Or we should have another debate about that.
It certainly requires another discussion, but at IIT Delhi, there was a study on citizen science and ecology and that domain. And we found that there were hardly about 20 or 22 citizen science projects in that area.
Okay.
And most of them were actually beginning studies, butterflies, sighting, flowering plants, sighting, and this and that. They are not enough. A small book has now come out, published through the IIT Mumbai. This gentleman moved to IIT Bombay after.
Okay.
I can send you that reference. And
sure.
I think it's available now easily. If you, I mean, even I can arrange to get you a copy of that.
Okay.
So, we're not doing a great deal of that at all in India, especially the study concentrated on the ecological side of things, protection, conservation, and so on. I'm not sure there are too many others either, but we must strengthen it. And the paper argues that there is a case for strengthening these, because these are the kinds of things that could be done on a large scale in the country. Some things like bird sightings, flowering, period of flowering, things like that are happening. Road kills of animals, for example. You drive through many of these conservation areas, protected areas, and lots of animals get killed. Is there an idea even how many of them are getting killed? So there was one study that was concentrating on it. So many useful studies could be generated through citizen science, and there is a great case for undertaking more of them, and I'm sure it will pick up. I sincerely hope so.
Many of the misunderstandings I've seen is because between science and the citizens is that we have not properly explained the process of science. We said there is data and this is how it happened, but how we arrived at the data, this is not explained. So that is one of the things that we have to really take care of as scientists. But once again, I must thank, all the speakers and bringing out so many good points today. It was a really, really enthralling session. And I hope our audience enjoyed it. We should get feedbacks from them, Dr. Nautiyal. Yes, so that we can have more of these, because today's it was very well attended, I saw, and a lot of interest generated in science communication. That is one very positive side of this.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Ranade would like to comment.
Only in the context of citizen science, I just would like to say there is a Professor Ananda Hota at BARC. He works at RAD at home. RAD stands for Radio Astrophysics at Home. And of course, as the ma'am correctly said, it needs a small training. And just to mention that there are more than a dozen of recognized peer-reviewed papers which got published through his group, where the citizen science have partnered out, did the large amount of astrophysical data which was available. And there is another group in Pune under the Meghadoot, where the rainwater quality and quantities have been worked out by Mayuresh Prabhune at Pune. So citizen science, well, as not in a huge number, but yes, certainly there are cases where the things have been considered. Starting.
Yes, I think in our country also it's picking up. And as ma'am pointed out, during the COVID period, the interest in science, even among the journalists, has shot up by a factor of about 2. I think in Nature somewhere I read that. So there are a lot of people who are taking interest in science after the COVID, because they have come to believe what Shubhraji said, that science is intertwined with society. So with this, we are coming towards the end of this program, and I am left with the most pleasant job of thanking everybody who contributed to making this program a success. This, of course, includes all 5 experts for the day: Dr. Nakul Parasha, Director Vigyan Prasar, Ms. Supra Priyadarshini of Nature India and Springer, and our 3 experts for this wonderful discussion: Dr. Hitesh, former scientist H and senior advisor of BBT and a writer; Hassan Javed Khan Sahab, the chief scientist at NISPER; and Palla Baja Sahab, a science journalist and whatnot. So they all enriched us with all their knowledge, and I am very thankful to them. And as far as the INSA is concerned, so many people contributed to this. First of all, the president, Professor Chandrima Shah, who not only thought of this idea and then encouraged it, but today, despite not being very well, she continued to sit through the whole session. But this, I also take this as a certificate to the program that it must have been very enjoyable. The audience of 220 plus is a surprisingly pleasant number, And I am really happy that efforts of all the people whom I'll be naming now, they have become very successful. I'll also thank Professor Sandeep Verma of SERB and the organization SERB for supporting this program. In fact, Professor Sandeep Verma tweeted about this program, and I think that is one of the factors so many people got to know about this program. The Executive Director, Dr. Arvind Ranade, Shri Sunil Zokarkar, Dr. Seema Mandal, Dr. Bhrutati Bhattacharya, Shri Kartikeyan, Shri Rajput, the Finance Division, the Administrative Staff, the Account Section, including the canteen. They all contributed towards making this program a successful one. But what would this program be if there were no audience? So I'll thank each one of the 220 plus people who sat through the program. And I think even at the end, something like 150 persons were present. So thank you very much for this. But please remember one thing. We'll be posting some of the photographs of this session on the Facebook page of INSA. So please visit Facebook page of INSA, not only for the report, but also for the photographs. And as ma'am said, we will look forward to your comments, suggestions, and feedback on our Facebook page. INSA has a website, as you know, insaindia.res.in, insaindia.res.in. Please visit that page to learn about the further and other activities. And there you will also find a very good example of science writing. And interestingly, the book by the name Indian Science Transforming India, in its original English version and also its translated Hindi version, Bharat Ko Badalta Bharatiya Vigyan. Both these books can be downloaded without any cost from the INSA website. There are several other books which can also be downloaded, and you will find the details of several other books. So please visit the website of Indian National Science Academy, insaindia.res.in. This program, we kept the official language as English, but in future we plan that we will also have a program sometime in our official language, that is Hindi. And that will also depend upon the feedback from you. So once again, thanking all of you for this cooperation in this program and make it a success. We bid goodbye for the now, but we will meet very soon again. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you. So we can close the meeting. Thanks a lot.